Councillor Nigel Patrick.
Thank you. Please be seated. Right, thank you. Item 1 then, announcements by the Mayor and Chief Executive. I've got a couple of announcements. Firstly, I'm very grateful for councillors for laying wreaths on behalf of the Mayor for Remembrance Sunday. And an actual reminder as we walk past the plaque beneath the painting of Queen Victoria on the stairs here in the Town Hall, the names of the employees of the Huddersfield Corporation who lost their lives during both World Wars. Secondly, there will be a comfort break somewhere during this agenda. Without a deputy mayor, I will no doubt need a comfort break, so we'll let you know at a reasonable point. Announcements by the Chief Executive.
Ooh, is it on? Oh, gosh, it is. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to briefly provide an update to Council in terms of security. We're currently all aware of the need for vigilance around security given the heightened levels of tension. With this in mind, I would encourage all councillors to attend one of the sessions that will be taking place on the 29th of November on the personal safety of councillors, details of which have been emailed to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 2, apologies for absence. Are there any apologies for absence? Councillor Munro.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, Councillor Kath Pinnock is unfortunately able to attend this evening.
Councillor Smith.
We have apologies from Councillor Michael Watson and Councillor Kath Taylor. Councillor Leeds Hamilton is on her way, but she's stuck in traffic. Thank you.
Councillor Sokol.
Mr. Mayor, apology from Deputy Mayor Councillor Mahmood Akhtar and apology from Councillor Sarwa. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sokol. Any more apologies? No. We'll move to item 3 then, minutes of the previous meeting. I move that the minutes of the meeting of the Council held on the 13th of October 2021 be approved as a correct record. Is that seconded? Councillor Sokol.
Mr. Mayor, I second the minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Is everybody in favour of that? Please show. That's carried. Thank you very much. Item 4, declarations of interest. Members who have any disclosable pecuniary interests which would prevent them from discussing or voting on any item should disclose their interests now. Are there any interests to declare? Councillor. Councillor Butt. Councillor Butt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to declare that I work for a pharmaceutical company that manufactures and promotes medicines, especially in the field of cancer. Because we have a potential motion tonight that we'll be discussing that, I felt it pertinent to make you aware.
Thank you, Councillor Butt. Any more? Then can I... Oh, Councillor Bolt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just if I could seek some clarity about whether we need to declare with regard to item 17, the governance review of town, parish and community councils. Do those of us who are honoured to represent such august bodies have to declare?
Councillor Bolt, obviously it's a matter for members who are also parish and town councillors to decide, but my advice might be that it's a little bit remote for you to have to vote on that. Potentially it could impact on a number of people, not just the existing town and parish councils, so I think it's a remote issue. But thank you for raising it with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bolt. In that case, can I remind any members who have declared an interest to complete the form and submit to the clerk by the end of the meeting? Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wish to raise a point of order. Under Standing Order 15, and it's paragraph 3, and it's to do with the order of the agenda for tonight's meeting. I'm concerned that we put aside council meetings during the year to hold the executive to account, and that so far we haven't been able to ask oral questions of the Cabinet at any meeting so far this year. And I would like to suggest, in order to rectify that we move item 13 to immediately after item 7. And that's under Standing Order 15, paragraph 3.
Is that seconded? Can we vote on that with show of hands, please? All those in favour? All those against? Yeah, we'll do a roll call. We'll do a roll call.
Members, the vote to move item 13 to after item 7, if you could indicate for, against or abstain. Councillor Pandor. Councillor David Hall. Councillor Lawson. Councillor Cooper. Councillor Greaves. Councillor Ahmed. Councillor Allison. Councillor Armour. Councillor Bamford. Councillor Bellamy. Councillor Bolt. Councillor Burke. Councillor Butt. Councillor Dadd. Councillor Paula Davis. Councillor Paul Davis. Councillor Donald Firth. Councillor Eric Firth. Councillor Gregg. Councillor Steve Hall. Councillor Hill. Councillor Holmes. Councillor Homewood. Councillor Mumtaz Hussain. Councillor Yusra Hussain. Councillor Idale. Councillor Kaushik. Councillor Kendrick. Councillor Khan. Councillor Lee Richards. Councillor Lise Hamilton. She's not here, is she? Councillor Lunat. Councillor Lowe. Councillor Lukic, Councillor Lyons, Councillor Marchington, Councillor Mather, Councillor McBride, Councillor McGuinn, Councillor McLaughlin, Councillor Monroe, Councillor O'Donovan, Councillor Patrick the Mayor, Councillor Patterson, Councillor Pervez, Councillor Amanda Pinnock, Councillor Andrew Pinnock, Councillor Ramsey, Councillor Reynolds, Councillor Scott, Councillor Sheard, Councillor Simpson, Councillor Smage, Councillor Anthony Smith, Councillor Richard Smith, Councillor Sokol, Councillor Stephen, Councillor John Taylor, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Uller, Councillor Uppel, Councillor Warner, Councillor Warner. Yeah. Abstain, okay. Councillor White and Councillor Zaman. How many are we down? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Abstain, that's right, there's one abstention. 30, 32.
I've got 30, 32.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. 34, 32 against. So it falls.
Okay, that's 34, 30 in favour, 32 against, 1 abstention. So that's not carried.
Thank you.
So we go on to item 5, petitions from members of the council. Are there any petitions to be submitted? Councillor Burke. Councillor Burke first. Councillor Burke first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
No, Councillor Burke first.
Burke or
Burke.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. You can. You
sure? I thought we were doing a joint one, but we'll do it separately. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for giving me the opportunity to be able to present this petition to council on behalf of the residents in the Linley ward. It's regarding road resurfacing and the improvements of our roads, footways and footpaths within the Linley ward area, and especially those near recent developments where they've taken place. Residents have contacted us in great numbers to be able to voice their concerns so that we can make these improvements. Around where new developments take place, there's often an increase in traffic, works traffic, and conditions as part of the planning application prevent works traffic going down some residential roads. However, as these aren't enforced and we don't seem to have the capacity or the personnel to be able to do that, these roads suffer greatly. The only thing I've seen to prevent works traffic is a sign, which I think has been ignored all of the times. So a lot of these roads are in great need of repair, and also the footways. So the petition is to try and get these resurfaced, repaired in a timely manner, and perhaps the bigger picture about making sure that at a planning stage that we're getting the conditions put in place and ensuring also that we can enforce these conditions. Otherwise they're quite meaningless and residents are quite let down because of this. As part of being able to improve our footways
Councillor
and roads...
Burke, we don't need a speech, we just need you to present the...
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Can you keep it short,
yeah,
please?
Sorry, just to finish, I think the important thing about trying to improve our roads and footways and footpaths is ensuring that our residents, both old, young, those with mobility difficulties, those going to schools, can have active travel in their areas, and we can join up old footpaths with existing footpaths and join that up, which hasn't happened today. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. So would somebody like to take the petition from? Thank you. Councillor Firth.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I will be brief. This is a petition from the residents from Princess Lane and the local area in Chickenley, a request for traffic calming.
Thank you, Councillor Firth. Are there any more petitions to be submitted by councillors? No? Then, in accordance with Council Procedure Rule 9 in brackets 3, I direct that the subject matter of the petitions be referred to the appropriate service director for investigation. Item 6, deputations and petitions from members of the public. To receive deputations first and petitions from members of the public. This evening we have 2, I believe. First, can I invite Keith Mallinson to please come forward and present his deputation. Welcome to the meeting, Keith. You have 5 minutes to present your deputation to Council.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My name is Keith Mallinson and I'm here today to submit a petition on behalf of the residents of Bowel Road in Dewsbury. Over the last few months, I've been talking to residents of Bowel Road and the surrounding areas, and time and time again the subject of congestion has been brought to my attention, in particular the junction of Bowel Road and the A653 Leeds Road. At peak times, drivers can be waiting up to 20 minutes to exit this junction. This has been made worse by a new housing development of 150 new houses off Rumble Road. A number of people who work in Leeds told me that if they don't leave home before 7:30 a.m, they cannot use the Leeds Road junction. The only alternative they have is to use the junction of Bowel Road and the A638 Wakefield Road, which does have a set of traffic lights. This increases the distance travelled to work by up to 2 miles. The petition I am submitting today has over 600 signatures and it is asking the Council to consider a traffic control system on the junction of Bowel Road and Leeds Road. The residents feel a traffic control system would help in 2 ways. The first, it would improve journey times dramatically, and second, it would greatly impact air quality and decrease emissions from those who are using the alternative Wakefield Road route into Leeds. Thank you.
Thank you. Can Councillor Mather respond to the deputation?
Thank you. Is this on? Thank you, Mr Mallinson, for your deputation. The Council is aware of the concerns at the junction of Bowel Road, Leeds Road, and the request for the implementation of a signal-controlled junction at this location. This junction has been explored previously following similar requests, but it has not been a priority for funding from highways budgets based on those investigations. However, I accept the petition you bring today, and you will get a response through this process, a formalised response from officers. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Can I invite Aziz Daji? I'm sorry if I've got pronunciation wrong, but can you please come forward and present your deputation? Welcome to the meeting. You've got 5 minutes to present your deputation to Council.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. My name is Aziz Daji. I'm the chair of Warwick Road Area Action Group. I represent residents in my area, over 1,000, 2,000 people that reside there. The residents are very, very angry, very upset at the council. For years, they have neglected our area. I've been emailing Councillor Mather there and Councillor Pandor, 4, 5, 6 long emails, and they just choose to ignore. I've asked them to come to our area to visit, to see for yourselves the state of the road. They won't bother to respond. It's led to me making a formal complaint against the councillor, and I hope that that will be taken forward in a proper manner. The issue is that if you visited the Warwick Road Batleycar area, you would see that the state of the roads are very, very poor. Some of them are damaging cars, and some of them are actually causing danger to the residents when they're walking across as well. So to prove my point, I actually, with the help of my local councillors, arranged a meeting with an officer to walk around the area. Having done that, that produced 20 action points that are all very, very valid, and I've got a copy here. Even then, that copy has gone to the councillor there, no response. Is this how councillors are going to behave? Where is the accountability, right? This is not good enough. The councillors are there to serve the community, and you should be doing your job, not making excuses all the time. The Labour leadership, I think, is failing the community. And I really think you councillors should speak up as well and make sure the councillors are accountable and doing their job. They're not. The residents, if you ask them, they're very, very fed up of the councillors, who they think don't even bother to respond to emails, don't even bother to respond and actually do their job. What kind of council are you running here then? If you're not representing the people, not serving them, why should I pay my council tax to you then? So really, I want to see action from the councillor there on those 20 action points. I want to know what you're going to do, when you're going to do it. And if you care to come to my area, I'll show you the state of the road. She says it's adequate. I don't even think the officer who saw the road for herself thought it was adequate. Yeah, they're a danger. And then the council wastes money outside my house by doing one little patch-up, leaving 3. Is that value for money? Is that what the council does? Does one little patch, leaves the rest? Come on, you councillors, you've got to hold these people to account. So really what I'm saying is, I need councillors to respond in a proper manner, to respond when you ask a question, and don't accuse people of doing things that they're not doing. So I really think I want some response from the councillor today, and also I want to know what's going to happen with the action points in my area. If not, I'll be here again next month with 1,000 people, residents. They'll all come here with me. Yeah, this is just not good enough. Lastly, I've made a formal complaint against the councillor. I don't know if any of you have bothered to look at the process as outlined.
Councillor, sorry.
It's absolutely ridiculous.
Sir.
Gee.
Can you stick to that original topic you were on?
Yeah, it's linked. It's linked.
Well,
so the second bit of that, first is the roads issue. The second bit is the process for complaining against councillors is just like the one like the MPs have. Doesn't work. Yeah, and it doesn't encourage people to complain. So I'm asking for a review of the council complaints process, and I'd like to be part of that. You need to carry an independent process, because it doesn't work. And if I had time, I can actually explain my own experience of that as well, which is absolutely ridiculous, the way it's been dealt with by the council. Yeah, it is a topic. It's all linked. So I'm dissatisfied with the councillors not doing their job right, so I complain. How is that not linked? Where's the common sense? So basically, we really want to see councillors more held to account, doing their job, and doing their job well. Yeah, not just taking the salary that you're getting paid.
30 seconds.
Okay, so I would like to see action points today and follow up on that. I would like to see some visits of the councillors instead of sitting in the town halls, and I'd like to see a review of the complaints process. It's a very valid point. If you care to look at the complaints process, you'll know what I mean against the councillors. It doesn't work. It doesn't encourage people to complain. So why do you have it then?
Thank you, sir. Can I invite Councillor Mather to respond?
Thank you, Mr. Daji, for, is it a petition or a deputation?
Deputation.
Okay. Thank you. You know very well I have provided you with a lot of information regarding Warwick Road. I have outlined the reasons and how the whole thing works. You know that councils up and down the country have suffered from Tory cuts to
rubbish.
£259 million cuts up and down the country, and that includes Kirklees. We in Kirklees have a backlog of £165 million worth of unclassified roads that need that kind of attention. We are beginning to invest in our roads. A programme of 15 million was unveiled last year. And guess where we started? In your ward. And we took your priorities and worked with those. You have a habit of lying.
Mr. Dargy, we listened to you.
Local councillors at the heart
Councillor
of
Mather,
decision-making.
Councillor Mather, just a minute. Stop just a minute. Councillor, Mr. Dargy, we listened to you for the 5 minutes. Now we've got to listen to Councillor Mather without interrupting her, please. Thank you.
So the works were carried out, and as far as I'm concerned, there is only one outstanding road for that programme to be completed. Like you, I too am very passionate about the roads. The condition of highways is very close to my heart, and I wish I had a magic money tree I could shake and get all of the roads across our district maintained to a high standard. And thank you for coming today and letting me know about your deputation. Oh, by the way, I forgot to say, I have been to your ward, but I didn't invite you. I did go down and I have spoken to the councillors. We have very close contacts with our councillors, and you need to be able to work with your councillors. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. If you can return to the seat, sir. You can come back another day. So we've no more deputations, I don't think. No, but we did have one petition involved in that. So I shall read, in accordance with Council Procedure Rule 9(3), I direct that subject matter of the petition be referred to the appropriate service director for investigation. Item 7 then, public question time. Can I invite David Heathcote to come forward, please, and ask your question.
Travel is it's vital that we get this right. It's important for our health, the environment, and our economy. So my question to the Cabinet is, who was consulted on the proposal to develop the active travel route that will convert Occupation Road in Lindley to a one-way system, and what other options were considered?
Councillor McBride.
Hi, David. The public consultation for the A629 Phase 4 is currently in progress. It started on the 26th of October and it will be completed on November the 23rd. Prior to this, flyers were sent to 160,000 households across the consultation area, posters having been displayed widely. An alternative route via Thornhill Road and Acre Street was considered, but rejected because it couldn't provide adequate cycling opportunities, and Acre Street is the route that ambulances take to A&E. Thus, it was considered Occupation Road a better route for cyclists and reducing potential conflicts with ambulances. There will be further targeted information near Occupation Road, such as face-to-face online workshops. Highways have taken consideration of the views of councillors, environmental bodies, emergency services, landowners, business residents and cycling groups. In short, every effort, I think, has been made to engage.
Have you got a supplementary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I only ask because we surveyed residents around Occupation Road, and when asked if they wanted the one-way system, a stonking 86% objected, and only 92% haven't completed the online consultation because they were not aware of it. So I think the council hasn't got the mood of local residents right. They don't understand the mood. So I would ask, Mr. Mayor, whether the Cabinet will work with residents rather than do to them.
Councillor McBride.
Enormous steps in order to involve the public, and is continuing to do so, which, David, you didn't seem to be aware of. Now, that is surprising and strange. I think this may be an element just to be difficult, and I do suggest that you engage and use all your information and put it forward in the formal process, and I assure you it will be taken notice of.
Next speaker. Can I invite Steve Slater to come forward, please? Welcome to the meeting. Ask your question, please.
Mayor, both my questions refer to the A629 Halifax Road Phase 5 scheme regarding several claims on air quality and carbon saving made by Councillor McBride, the lead councillor for the scheme, at the last council meeting in October. Regarding air quality, the first claim, and I quote, was that the impact of the scheme is enormous in terms of carbon saving and pollution elimination. Second, that the scheme will lead to massive improvement in pollution levels at Blacker Road Junction. And third, that the scheme will allow Blacker Road to be removed from the air quality traffic management area, that is, removed from AQMA6. But, given that the Principal Council commissioned air quality study, the A629 Halifax Road Air Quality Assessment, finds instead that the scheme is not significant in terms of impacts on air quality. The scheme will give no improvement at all in particulate levels at Blacker Road, and that the very modest 4% fall in NO2 levels at Blacker Road is more than matched by a scheme worsening at a residential site in a different air quality management area, AQMA9. And far from the scheme itself allowing the removal of Blacker Road from AQMA6, that, due mainly to existing and forecast pollution reduction trends, will happen anyway, with or without the road scheme. So given all that, my first question is simply this. Since the primary supporting document, the air quality assessment, does not support the Council's bold claims on air quality, what evidence is the Council relying on? Moving now to my second question, regarding carbon saving, and again I quote Councillor McBride, it was claimed that the impact of the scheme is enormous. Again, given that this is not supported by the relevant council-commissioned evidence, the revised carbon impact assessment of August 2021, which finds that there is no overall carbon saving at all, that's in Table 5, the carbon summary, that forecast savings from tree planting are far outweighed by emissions from construction plus operation of 42,521 tonnes. So the conclusion is not for a carbon saving, but rather for an overall increase in emissions of 36,380 tonnes. Given that, my second question is this. In the absence of supporting evidence in the carbon impact assessment, what evidence is the Council relying on for its claims of overall carbon savings? Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Simpson. Yes, Councillor McBride, we thought it was you for 1 second, but it's a bit confusing. Could you answer those questions, please?
Yes, I can. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. You've asked you 2 questions in one go, so shall I answer the first, and if you want to ask a supplementary on that, and then I can go on to the second? Okay. So firstly, thank you very much for being here and for your question. I much appreciate the opportunity to clear up any misunderstanding. It's been acknowledged by everyone at every stage of the healthcare discussions that access between the hospitals must be improved to make sure that our residents can access emergency services they need when they need them, particularly in the most challenging of circumstances. So the purpose of this scheme, the scheme is designed to enable people to move around efficiently and provide a strategic link between Calderdale and Huddersfield hospitals, and aims to reduce congestion, which everyone at every stage of the hospital service discussions has said is essential. The project you ask about is Phase 5 of course, a 5-phase scheme, the other 4 being in Calderdale and going ahead. If this council doesn't deliver on phase 5, it will unfortunately result in the bottlenecking of all those other improvements, because they are of course going ahead, and congestion will worsen further on our side of the A629 coming down past the hospital and into town. With that said, there are always positives and negatives in anything as complex as this, and it's important that they're all taken into account and considered on balance. Kirklees Council commissioned detailed air quality modelling data as part of the A629 scheme development to understand the impact on pollutant levels from junction changes. This piece of work was carried out in line with national guidance and benchmarked against the Council's own information to provide confidence in the outputs of the study. The evidence we rely on as part of our air quality assessment includes the air quality impact assessment completed for the scheme, our own traffic and air quality monitoring data. The findings identified that the modelled improvements at the Blacker Road junction as part of the scheme would be sufficient to bring 2021 Kirklees Council air quality monitoring concentrations below the legal limits and bring the area into compliance. At Blacker Road, the Blacker Road location, there's a predicted positive impact of 1.3 micrograms per cubic metre as a result of the improved flows and design of the junction, which will help towards bringing about compliance and improve the conditions in the locality. The pre-pandemic concentration, 2019, at Blacker Road Air Quality Management Area was 42.7 micrograms per cubic metre and not compliant within the legal value. Some trends from previous years' data did show reductions of 17% over a 5-year period up to 2017. But since that time, there's been a stagnation in the concentration levels above the legal limit, and the figures do indeed, unfortunately, remain illegal. So legally and morally, we need to do something to address air quality pollution levels in this area. We can't just sit back and rely on the market to do it for us, because market forces aren't going to deliver clean air. In summary, the wider model for the whole scheme shows that it will have a positive impact within the Blacker Road Air Quality Management Area. In other areas, figures will of course change, because when you change how traffic flows, that's going to change how the traffic flows. But the modelling has shown that this is having a negligible impact and overall will remain in continued compliance within the legal limits, allowing for the Council to consider the revocation of the air quality management area in accordance with DEFRA's procedures.
Would you like to ask a supplementary on that first question?
Yes. I feel that the issue of ambulance times, of course, that's important, but it's certainly not included in any of the data that's been put forward, for example, the transport or the planning statements, nor is it included, as far as I'm aware, as an aim, as an overt aim of the scheme. So, and I would say that you're positing a lot about it. It's fairly speculative because there's no data I'm aware of to back that up. And on the air quality issue, again, are you setting aside the air quality assessment that is now within a planning application document? Because what you're saying is different. They use DEFRA guidance to reach their conclusions, and that very clearly contradicts your, I think you said 2019, 2020 levels at Blacker Road. So it's all very well to say, well, the council have got their own figures. Now,
is there a question coming out of this?
Okay, a question, right. Given that the air quality assessment makes the point that the monitoring method, diffusion by diffusion, is not known for its accuracy, and that all the sites where you do that use that method, isn't it rather jumping the gun to decide to do the whole A629 scheme when the knock-on effect is going to be a worsening of air quality in another air quality management area?
Councillor Simpson, reply, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So on the ambulance times and traffic data, That has been included in the work that has gone through the Joint Health Scrutiny Committee. I remember meetings that myself and Councillor Smage and Councillor Cooper were in where we received that information. I do not remember off the top of my head, because of course there's a lot of information in the planning application, whether or not that is attached as on the planning portal, but I'll review that. But that information is publicly available. But I'll check that after this meeting. On the air quality point, no, not at all disregarding our air quality study in any way. I think we're talking to the same thing, but I think we've interpreted it slightly differently. What the study does show is a change in some areas, but it says that is negligible. That being negligible. That being below 1 microgram per cubic metre. The change that is incredibly positive is that we can remove an area that currently has illegal air from an air quality management area. And as a council, we are discharged with a legal duty on those issues. And of course, I think we've got a moral one as well. I did ask for some further work with regard to some comments that have been made and questions that have been asked about air quality in the area. Some people have suggested that because of the pandemic, we've had a reduction of the number of vehicles on the road, and thereby the area might already be below the legal limits. Now, usually we don't have that data until the end of the year, but I asked my officers, because I wanted to investigate that, and if that was the case, that's a really important piece of information. So I asked my officers to go out and do that work. And what we got back was that, according to the transport data we have, levels of traffic appear to return to normality around March 2021. We've used our diffusion tube data thereby from the 4th of March to the 28th of September 2021 to determine the concentrations as they are at the moment in time in that area and benchmarking them against our air quality objectives.
30 seconds,
I'll be quick.
Councillor
The data collected from the study showed that the post-pandemic concentrations of particulates are estimated to have returned to the pre-pandemic levels already. And this data shows that the continued trend of stagnation in improvements at this location, with 2021 levels being even greater than those observed in 2019 and 2016. So, unfortunately, okay.
Thank you for asking those questions.
I haven't answered his other one yet.
Sorry?
I haven't answered his other one yet.
You've had your time, though.
Yeah, but it was another question.
Sorry? Well, we're out of time anyway. Would somebody like to move an extension to this?
Thank you,
That's
Andrew.
moved and seconded.
Comrade.
All those in favour? That's carried. We will move until the end of the public questions.
I won't ask you to read the question out again to save Mr. Mayor from getting a bit red. But so the question was relating to the carbon impact assessment and Councillor McBride's comments about the carbon saving as part of the scheme. So I believe my colleague Councillor McBride's comments were referring to the proposals around the trees that's within the carbon impact assessment.
Overall, the word he used.
The carbon
overall. Just one at a time, please.
The carbon sequestration for that has been assessed using iTree Eco, which is a tool developed and promoted by the Forestry Commission. And that shows that the trees, which unfortunately do have to be removed, could soak up 341 tonnes of carbon, and that the new trees could soak up 2,911 tonnes of carbon within 30 years. So that's an overall net carbon benefit of 2,570 tonnes. And that information is set out in the carbon impact assessment, which is publicly available. I believe that's what Peter was talking to him, but if you'd like him to clarify, I'm sure you could ask him a question in future, but you'll have a supplementary on that, I think.
Well, I quoted Councillor McBride that on carbon saving, he specifically said the impact of the scheme is enormous. He wasn't just talking about the trees at the time, because it was in response to another member of the public, and her question was not simply about the trees. And you simply seem to be ignoring the findings of the carbon impact assessment, which, as I say, the trees form a tiny part of the overall figures, about 1/7. the great bulk of it is caused by the increase in traffic that the scheme will lead to, induced traffic. And that's gives us that net disbenefit, as it explains in the conclusion to the carbon impact assessment. It's clear as day, 36,380 tonnes negative. So to keep representing this scheme as a positive for carbon emissions is simply false. Well, it's no good shaking your head, Councillor.
No, just a minute. Just ask him a question and he'll answer it, and that's it, we're done. Because this is going on and on and on and on. And I don't want it to go on and on and on and on. As much as it's interesting, I don't want it to go on and on. You've asked your question, you've asked a question, I think.
Yep, I can answer it.
You reply to this one and then...
I'll sit down. Don't worry, I'll be out of your hair soon, Mr Mayor. Yeah, so with regard to the operation emissions that you're referring to, I do appreciate and take on board what you're saying. The emissions from the operation in the CIA do include cars that are already on the road and outputting the very same carbon, just on different streets and in different areas, perhaps even more so if they're in an area on a road that's got poor traffic flow. So much of that, although it appears as net, isn't new carbon or in fact net carbon. It's already been emitted, it's just drawn into the scope of the study because we're improving the flow, so we assume that vehicles from side roads and so on will instead choose the trunk road. But the net impact of the vehicles in reality is nil unless we suspect that us making some junction improvements at Blacker Road is going to make lots of people who are on public transport suddenly think, oh, I'm going to go out and buy a car because the council have just made some junction improvements at Blacker Road. And I think that would be, I wouldn't make that investment myself personally.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Do we have any more speakers, please? Any more people want to ask questions? Mason? Hassan Badat? Hassan Badat, welcome to the council. Please, can you ask your question? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, Madam Chief Executive, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity to ask this question. At the full council meeting way back in December 2018, there was an agenda item called something like Justice and Equality. And as a result of that, the following full council meeting, January 2019, I myself attended and did a deputation, a bit like the deputations earlier, and I talked about institutional racism and how it affected or how it shouldn't affect the Kirklees Council and its inhabitants. Obviously, time has gone on. Now, I asked for lots of things to happen at that time, and I didn't really have any comeback from anyone, not that I can recall, in terms of being invited to some kind of a committee or a working group or something. But what I have witnessed and observed markedly is the continuation of institutional racism. It's been rife. Now, I don't think any of you could fail to have witnessed what's happened recently, just down the road, as it were, at Headingley and the wider county in terms of Yorkshire county.
Mr. Hassan, can you ask a question, please?
Am I not allowed to build up to why the question is?
Bring it into the question. Come on.
That's what I'm trying to do. If you don't want me to ask a question, I'll sit down.
No, I want you to ask a question.
Well, then allow me to build up. The last chapter, they had 20 minutes. At least give me the courtesy of building up my question, sir. Because I've relayed it back, if I can go on, to the background to the full council meeting of previous years, and I've said nothing's happened. And what's happened recently, the reason for me for saying that is you should be ringing alarm bells, absolute alarm bells with Kirklees Council, because if anything, what's happening in Kirklees Council is 10 times worse than what's happening in Yorkshire County Cricket Club. So my question partly is, what are you doing about it? Have you already instigated some kind of a panel to deal with it, an emergency section of the cabinet or something like that to deal with it? Because to me, and I can evidence everything, Mr. Chairman, there seems to be nothing happening, and the community, especially the minority communities, are suffering. When I did come, the response given by the leader at the time was something like, look around you and there's members of the BAME community on the, the cabinet, as it were. But look, again, I hasten to use the example of Yorkshire County Cricket. One of the excuses given by that club was that the Azim Rafiq's PDA, personal development assistant, was someone of colour, but that didn't help him, did it? So that's not a good enough excuse. You need to be doing something about that, and urgently, because one of the other significant things about the other example I'm giving is that led to suicidal thoughts. And I can give you, and I'm sure people here who are on some similar email chains that I'm on will have read suicidal thoughts emerging from the people of colour being handled by Kirklees Council. Something needs to be done urgently. Yeah, it's a problem with the Yorkshire County Cricket Club. The reason that became flowing is because of the threat from potential sponsors and the taking away of liberties in terms of hosting a test ground. Well, we don't want to be doing the same thing in terms of withdrawing our community charge funds or going to the governance, which is the central government. So, is the council doing anything about it? Has it done anything about it, either as a response or during the last 2 years? I thank you, Chair.
Do you want to reply to that, Councillor Pando?
Thank you, Hassan, for your question. And Mr. Mayor, I just want to reflect on the allegations that was made against me. There is a very clear process from the previous person who actually spoke. I didn't say anything, but I think it's good to actually put the record straight because they both come together. For the record, if anybody feels that they are not being treated, they can make a complaint. So I refer back to Mr. Darji's comments earlier on. I don't want to go into the details about the emails, but if anybody read them emails, they would actually put a counter-complaint in. And one thing I will not tolerate is any member, especially women, the way they are treated in this council chamber or elsewhere. And Mr. Darji, you just need to reflect on your words. We listen to you carefully, and you need to make sure that your word and your comments are tempered. Moving on to the question that Hassan has raised. Hassan, you did come to this council meeting, and one of the things we've learned over the years is there is institutional racism everywhere. And one of the things that we have done is on the back of the murder of George Floyd, this council took immediate action. I didn't do what other people did across the country and nationally by actually going to Twitter. I actually reflected and I actually pondered and I actually said, what is the problem here? And first thing we did was to develop an action plan. Because one thing I do not want to do is any of our employees, be they from a BME community, be they from an LGBT community, be they disabled, or be they any other categorized group, I don't want them to feel uncomfortable. And sometimes, when we conduct our debates in the council chamber, we have to understand that we are being watched. We are being watched by other politicians. We are being watched by our staff. And we are being watched by the public. And if responsible people who allege to represent people outside, they also need to understand that what they say could actually fuel hatred, and we can actually go backwards. The kind of actions we put in straight away was to develop our BME networks. The networks we have developed is to actually speed up the process in terms of personal development, management training, apprenticeships. We've also worked with the Black and African Caribbean community. We've also developed an inclusion commission. And only last week, Mr. Mayor, we were shortlisted for a European Diversity Award. Not one, but two. And one of them was on the IMWS Executive Committee a few years ago, Mr. Sajid Mayat, who actually is the HR champion to tackle inclusion, diversity, and equalities. And that, you might say, well, what's the point of going for awards? Unless we sing our own praises, we get the kind of comments Hassan quite rightly raised. And I think you just need to look at what we have been doing. Because the European Diversity Awards are not just given willy-nilly. We have to go through a number of checks and balances and evidence. And we have to sing out more loudly. We have to take responsibility as councillors, as community representatives, because there is a spiral of hatred that is developing not just here, but nationally and internationally. In terms of what we are doing, we are actually putting where our words, where our mouth is. We are developing an inclusion commission, and I'm glad that, through working on a cross-party basis, we are going to move forward. It might not be called the inclusion commission, but at least there is cross-party agreement that is a problem here. It's not just a problem around BME community, it's a problem for every single specialist categorised group that we need to actually address. If you come to a future council meeting, Hassan, in January, we are going to bring back an annual report. In there, it will detail every single detail what we have been doing. It will detail what we are doing in terms of inclusion and diversity, because one of the things I will not tolerate is A, if there's any evidence that you can show me, I will make sure that I will look at it, but B, perceptions. And Hassan, you're a learned man, yeah? And you need to tackle them perceptions as well. What's happening around us is not good. But I know, and I can be proud to say that we in Kirklees Council are hitting the issues head on, and we will not hide, and we will not pass our responsibility on anybody else. But we have to temper what we say, not just as councillors, but also as community representatives. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Pandor. Do you have one supplementary question? Thank you.
Thank you for that opportunity, Chair. Shabir, I'm very happy to give compliments where it's due. I've got no problem. And I commend the council, as I did at the last meeting a couple of years ago, on what it did when it presented that report. But I'm sorry, it misses the point. My point is not about diversity and inclusion. My point is specifically about institutional racism. One of the things I ask for is proper training to officers as well as the councillors to find out exactly what it means, because I'm convinced most of the people don't. I said that loudly at the last meeting, and in terms of evidence I've observed in my time, I still don't think that's happened. So it's about institutional racism. It's the kind of thing, I shouldn't have to tell you, Sabir, because you're also a learned man. It's the kind of things that happens when a lot of people don't even realize that's it's happening. But the impact is if I might finish, the impact is it can cause people to think about taking their lives. I don't need to give you specific examples because you've been on a lot of the email chains, but even referring back to Azim Rafiq, it can cause suicide. Please, for goodness sake, start listening. None of this mamby-pamby.
Can we have a question, please?
Question.
Sorry? Can you turn it into a question, please?
Please start. It's not exactly a question, to be fair. But will you start listening to my concerns, and echoed by lots of other people, about institutional racism and the potential threat it has for people's lives, not to mention health and safety and welfare?
Thank you. Councillor Pandor.
I will make sure that you get our annual report that is being drafted at the moment. This council will be debating exactly the points you are talking about, and in there it will show you exactly how we are addressing the issues you raised. And if I stand here and say that, no, we've got it right, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that we have moved a long way, and you, Hassan, know that we have moved a long way. And the example I've gave you earlier on, the awards that we've had, they don't just give them for something and nothing. So I have to disagree with you, Hassan. There's a long way to go, but I think you're being unreasonable by actually just talking about one particular issue. It's a broad issue that we need to tackle in society. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you both. That was interesting.
Thank you.
Next questioner. Greg Christophe. Welcome to the meeting. Can you please ask your question?
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, I'm here again to raise my concerns about the Home for Scheme in Victoria Street, the loading area. I asked the last time when I was here, my concerns would close business down. I didn't took it very seriously, I feel, by Councillor McBride and Councillor Davies. I got an email here from my flower, 80 million, to say they will not deliver to me if they have to cross the road with the flowers in their bags. They have to cross the road 150 times if they're going to do it. They're putting in danger their staff. And I want to know what the council is going to do about it, because it's putting in danger not only my business, but other businesses in south of Victoria Street. And I know for a fact the government will not interfere on your business, how you're going to do the scheme. So I can understand why you're doing the loading area on the other side of the road, on the north side, except on the south, where we got more deliveries and more businesses, and it's the most busiest area in Holmfirth. So I want to know what you're going to do to save our businesses, including mine.
Thank you. Councillor McBride.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've answered this question before. This scheme enables the traffic to move through a very difficult point and difficult junction. The consequence of it is, in order to do that, the traffic has got to be able to move, which means there is some dislocation which is going to affect adversely one part of the road, one side of the road, rather than another. That's been looked at again. I can't think of any minor road scheme that has been dealt with in such detail and been so considered by officers. But the net conclusion was, on balance, and it is on balance, and this was the best one in order to achieve a movement of the traffic which is absolutely necessary, and at the same time accommodate as far as possible the needs of all of the incumbents and all of the people who have business on both sides of the road. It's an attempt to, what shall I say, have the wisdom of Solomon. Where do you cut the baby in half? The difficulty of making a choice, and we have made a choice, and on balance, I think it's the right choice. And I do understand the problem, and I'm sympathetic to it. But I think on balance, it's the sensible choice and necessary to keep the traffic moving, which is the critical variable in terms of the future development of Holmfirth.
Supplementary.
I don't accept that.
I'm sure you don't.
Is work without traffic lights in Holmfirth. If the traffic lights are switched on, the traffic is run. The scheme you're doing is you're introducing 20 miles or 10 miles an hour. I think the scheme, what it's all about really, is to knock the market hold down, to save £50,000 a year, just in our expenses. I thought the council is for saving business, working with businesses, not closing business down. So for that reason, I'm not accepting that one. You make the scheme, we are in 2021, you can spend some money and sort the traffic lights out and your problem is gone. I'm there all the time to see all this, you are not.
Do you want to ask a question? Do you want to ask a question?
This question is why I'm not spending the money properly except trying to close business down.
I repeat the point. There has been no scheme in any part of Kirklees that's ever had the detailed consideration that this has had, both within the council and externally within the parish. And it's the conclusion of that, not my presumption. I'm not imposing something. I'm drawing a conclusion which is the result of significant consultation with the people of the area. And I do accept and understand it causes difficulty. Whatever decision was made was never going to be ideal. But there are many such situations in traffic management throughout the country. And therefore, some difficult decisions have got to be made. I think on balance, this is a sensible one. And I think the council has done all it can in the circumstances.
I don't accept that.
Thank you, Mr. Christophe. Next questioner, please. Kieran Cow.
Hi, so my name's Kieran, and my question also refers to the Holmfirth Town Centre. So I'm just going to follow on from Greg's point. So by removing the loading facilities on 17 Victoria Street side of the road, we won't be able to conduct our services without the following dangers. Firstly, there's heightened danger to the vehicle driver and civilians when we're reversing a vehicle out into the main road once entering the rear tie alleyway. This risk is demonstrated by an incident which occurred in the alleyway on the 26th of May 21, whereby a council driver crashed into a parked vehicle and damaged property, leading to thousands of pounds worth of damage. How will the risk be mitigated?
Sorry?
How will the risk be mitigated if our side of the road will not have the loading bay?
Councillor McBride.
I think I've indicated that this has been looked at in very fine and great detail and involved the public in the area. There is a difficult choice to make, and I don't think the solution is perfect. No solution of traffic in difficult circumstances like this, and there are so many throughout the country, it's never going to be perfect. But this is the best solution for the situation as now, which is that the traffic really can't move through. And this is supposed to be a through road. You've got to arrange something which enables this to happen. And there are negative consequences. And I'm sorry, this issue has been looked at in very fine detail by highways, by parish councillors, by the local councillors in the area, and the committee. So it's not as though this has been sort of, cursorily passed over. It's been looked at in the finest detail. As I say, there is no ideal and perfect solution, but on balance, this is the best.
Okay, so...
Do you have a supplementary?
Yeah.
Make it into a question, please.
So if there's not enough space to load or unload safely and for people to move around, how can we proceed? How are we supposed to conduct our business? And where's the risk mitigation as well?
I think there are difficulties for businesses both sides of the road, and whatever we did would have consequences. I think the businesses will be positively affected by virtue of the ability for the traffic to move through. At the moment, it is horrendously congested, and the future of that whole area is diminished by virtue of the congestion.
Thank you. Thank you very much for coming and asking a question. We've got one more questioner. Aziz Darji is going to ask a question. Please make sure you ask a question, and then you get one supplementary.
I'll do my best.
Make it clear.
I can't allow
Make it clear who you're going to ask
Councillor
the question.
Pandor to get away with what he said earlier, right? You cannot use gender issues to shut people up. That's what he's doing. I'm happy to share the emails I sent to Councillor to all of you. Then you can judge for yourself. I'm a man of principle. I worked for the council over 20 years, 10 years as a senior manager in children's services. I'm a person of integrity. I know what I'm talking about when I make issues. So, Councillor Mather, I asked and you don't answer, that's the problem, you waffle. I asked what action you're going to take on the 20 action points, no answer. And then simply laying the blame on the local councillors that they undermine with Councillor Pandor. That's not good enough.
What's your question?
I've got another question. What action are you going to take on the action points that have been laid out, 20 action points? She didn't answer that earlier.
Councillor Mather. Councillor Pandor.
Mr. Mayor, I am extremely disappointed. And to be honest with you, somebody who I respect, who I thought was a pillar of the community, who I've actually looked up for many, many years. And it's a shame that the way he has come across today, by picking on Asian female councillors, is completely not on.
Chair, this is absolutely out of order. It's turning into a risk, into a gender issue when there isn't one. Absolutely. Just because a leader, council leader, don't mean you can get away with this.
Wait.
What's going on here?
Wait.
Mr. Mayor.
Aziz.
We live in a democracy.
I respect you.
Councillor Pandor, would you stop for a second, right? Aziz, just listen to me. This is questions and answers.
Yeah.
You ask a question, Councillor Pandor answers. You get a supplementary, Councillor Pandor. Wait. If we can't do it properly, we won't do it at all. So let Councillor Pandor answer, and Councillor Pandor, try not to get too personal with it.
Mr. Mayor,
we just want an answer.
I will give you the facts. Mr. Mayor, at the last local election, I had female councillors crying.
What?
I had female councillors crying every day.
He's using emotion.
Aziz.
Mr. Mayor, some of the emails that were sent to myself and Naheed were completely below the belt. I don't have a problem in making myself available, being accountable, but as councillors, you will know that we are accountable, A, to this council chamber. We are accountable to each other. We are accountable to our branches.
To the public.
We are accountable to the public.
First and foremost.
And as a leader, I get many, many emails. And it's only fair that a Liberal Democrat councillor, a Conservative councillor, Mr. Mayor, I was asked the question.
Can I finish my question?
Yes, John Lawson. You second that? Right. Can I just, before we do that, can I just ask if we can just try and get this finished? Will you both decide whether you're going to do this properly? Otherwise,
is it a point of personal explanation, please? Because
otherwise, I'm going to have to stop.
Mr. Mayor, I've stayed quiet for a while. I was referenced twice. And it's only fair that because this is a public meeting, this is webcast, to set the record straight. I don't have a problem with anybody asking a question. It doesn't matter who it is. But when I am accused in a public meeting, when one of my cabinet member, who I know has been through hell and back, is accused in a public meeting, I cannot stay quiet. Especially when she's a woman, a female as well.
Sure.
It does not matter, Mr. Mayor. And that's why I am standing here. Because
excuse, emotion. Emotion, that's all he's doing. Chair, can I come back? Emotional blackmail is what he's doing. Emotional blackmail. Don't buy it.
Right, I've given you both the opportunity to do this properly, so I'm going to draw this to a close now, and we're going to move on to the next item.
Chair, can I get my question?
No, that's. We're going to draw this to a close now. Everybody's asked the question that wanted to ask a question, so I'm going to draw it to the close. We've got to get back to the agenda now.
My question.
No, I've drawn this item to a close now.
You won't get away with emotional blackmail, I'll tell you that much, Shabir. Yeah, I represent my community, that's why I'm here.
Mr. Mayor, that is a threat.
When you ask questions, accountability, they don't like it.
Right,
Mr. Mayor, on the back
right. I'm going to adjourn the meeting for 10 minutes.
Thank you. Please be seated. Item 8. West Yorkshire Combined Authority minutes. Page 9. To receive for information the minutes of West Yorkshire Combined Authority. The minutes are here for noting. Are there any comments or questions regarding the minutes? Councillor Bolt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Several parts of this report refer to funding from Department of Transport and from DFT associated funding. We've heard earlier on about the paucity of finances, despite the fact there's a massive increase in pothole funding. One element which Kirklees have is they just spent £1.6 million resurfacing the Cooper Bridge Junction, an 8-week disruption on major roads. Could I ask the Cabinet member, therefore, if they are aware of the constraints of the new Road and Streetworks Act for which Kirklees are liable, which has within it a moratorium on resurfacing, on when you can dig up a road after it's been resurfaced? Because relating to finances, management of finances is not just dealing with income, but it's also prudent and careful management of expenditure. So, given that the new Road and Streetworks Act was brought in so that councils could manage utilities, is it not hypocritical that this council and this cabinet has sanctioned the resurfacing of major roads in this borough and also in Calderdale, but in 2 years are going to be digging them up again, which is contrary to the new Road and Streetworks Act, and to many members of the public seems plain daft, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bolt. Councillor Marchington.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's really pleasing to see that the West Yorkshire Combined Authority is looking at the what they call the economic recovery strategy for West Yorkshire post-COVID, and I just wanted to make one or two comments about that and Kirklees' input into that. In the report, there's comments about changing it from once we've recovered from COVID, from a recovery programme into a growth programme. I'm not sure that is actually what the right direction that we should be going in. And I think having conversations with our representative on the Combined Authority, and perhaps Councillor Pandor or Councillor Scott is there, actually it's probably more appropriate for West Yorkshire if we have an economic development plan, that we have a really good grasp of what we want the economy of West Yorkshire in connection with other parts of the UK to be for the medium and long term. So I just really encourage that. I have concerns again, and I've said this before at council after council, about the line, it's on page 11, paragraph 2, about government investment. And continually, regions around the country appear to have to go cap in hand to central government to fund actually what we ought to be able to fund ourselves. I've just unpicked a few figures, and again, I think the most straightforward comparison with the rest of the UK is between Yorkshire and the Humber, and Scotland. Both of them have got a similar population of 5.55 million, and yet Scotland year on year receives an extra £12.3 billion to invest in its economy. And there might be good reasons. Obviously, Scotland's a much bigger country, it's much more diverse, much more rural, but actually, is that the right amount? And it disturbs me when we've got senior members in councils from across West Yorkshire, plus business partners, discussing the economy, and we're still having to go cap in hand to central government, and I do not think that's appropriate. I think what I think what the Liberal Democrats would like to see is if we're going to shape and discuss the economy of our area, Kirklees and beyond, there actually needs to be a stronger mechanism between those who collect the taxes, HMRC, and how those taxes are spent. And then we can have a better... And we know that there is a need for net inward investment in Yorkshire and Humber, and I assume that's the same in West Yorkshire as well. But what's the mechanism? So that we know that the economy that we develop here is going to be a contribution. I think... I also want to raise the phrase, and it's the Mayor's, West Yorkshire Mayor's pledge for 1,000 well-paid jobs. There's a working age population in West Yorkshire of 1.5 million people. So 1,000 well-paid jobs sounds like a lot, but it's less than 0.1% of the working age population. And you know, and there's a phrase in the summary document, there's a phrase, the good jobs. What does that mean? I like the phrase that Kirklees came up when we looked at when we look at our economic development strategy and our health and wellbeing, the ladder of opportunity. Jackie's smiling back. Because actually, sometimes we focus totally on the high-paid, high-skilled jobs, which are really important, they're going to be, but there's a whole ladder of opportunity underneath that. And we need to make sure that there are well-paid and good jobs in terms of jobs that for all of our working population, and that might be the people who are cooking and cleaning, as well as those people who are doing R&D and development and manufacture, which is particularly whatever factor. So I think what I would have liked to have seen is more detail. I would like some figures about what the employment pattern of across West Yorkshire is. Councillor Scott, who attended that meeting, might be aware of those figures. If not, can you point me in the direction of those Cathy? And we need to make sure that the economy in West Yorkshire works for everybody. The young people who are yet to enter the economy, we've got the paragraph on the skills development in Kirklees, we need to look at that. Those who are retired are going to need people to care for them into their hopefully long and healthy old age. And also there's people who are at working age across West Yorkshire. West Yorkshire has huge benefits in terms of the economy. We've talked about research and development. We've got excellence in manufacturing, particularly in engineering, in advanced textiles, and agrochemicals. So I think it'd be really good if there's a better mechanism for us from Kirklees to input into this discussion and to actually have a look at some of those details so those who are discussing this on our behalf can make a full contribution. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marchington. Councillor Munro.
This is just in relation to economic recovery in the minutes, in relation to the reboot scheme. It was noted there had been little traction in Kirklees in relation to the reboot scheme. This was a scheme aimed at reskilling the workforce during the pandemic when people were at risk of losing their jobs. I did flag it up with officers at the time of its introduction, but officers seemed to be unaware of it. This is quite concerning. So I think it would be really helpful in the future if, for example, if the equivalent scheme that they're going to be starting up called the Gain Share funded scheme, set to replace the reboot scheme, could be circulated widely across the council so that everybody's aware of it and we can all take and people can take advantage of the benefits of such a scheme in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Munro. Are there any more questions or comments on this item? In which case, I'll ask Councillor Pandor to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Regarding the specific question from Councillor Bowel, what I'll do is I'll ask Councillor Mather to come and respond to that after I finish. But in terms of the comments made by Councillor Marchington and Councillor Munro, in terms of what do you call it? Do you call it economic recovery or do you call it economic development plan or a growth programme? To me, the bottom line is that the last 18 months have actually shown massive inequalities in our community. And that's why we developed the recovery plan at the combined authority. And this wasn't done in isolation with the 5 leaders and the mayor. This was done with our private sector partners, our university partners, and voluntary community sector, and also the creative industry. Because one of the things that the pandemic has shown me is it's brought the best out of us. We developed a vaccine that usually takes about 10 years, and within 12 months, and the government also stepped up as well, so I really appreciate that. And we got something done really, really quickly. But at the same time, it's actually put a real black spot on our society, our business, our community, and how we operate as a whole. And I'll tell you what I mean by that, and we've repeated this many, many times. But the inequalities we see, the gap between people who are well off and not well off, the people who actually serve frontline services, our care staff, our NHS staff, and those who actually don't really have a choice to actually work from home were disproportionately more affected in terms of people who live on the periphery of our council estates, BME communities, and people with underlying conditions and health conditions. We saw that they were dying at a far more higher and alarming rate than the rest of the population. So the recovery plan really is also about not just growth and productivity, but it's also about making sure that the trickle-down economics of yesterday do not translate into something in the future. And one of the things that we're seeing at the moment is inflation is rising. Today it was just announced that it's actually going faster than we've ever known. Predictions are from the Office of Budget Responsibility that they will stabilise and marginalise, come down to something of a norm. But at the same time, there's other economic commentators that are saying that actually we're going into a cliff edge where society will fail. I know for a fact that some of my constituents across the Kirklees have faced bills in double figures, 33%. Cost of living is going up. And national policy is failing because national policy says actually just increase your wages. Now I appreciate what you're saying, the Prime Minister, but you can't inflate wages and not increase productivity. And we have a workforce, that Councillor Munro mentioned, one of the schemes, that we can tap into. And this is why I'm really proud that this council, a few years ago, got its local plan approved. So we've got a very clear plan regarding where we need to invest in our business. We've got a very clear plan where we need to actually develop our new skills on our employment sites. And we also have a very clear plan regarding the housing that we desperately need. And again, the government target of 250,000 homes a year, I completely agree with that. But they need to do a lot more in terms of how they can accelerate that by making sure that we actually deliver on our housing programme. So if all that actually comes through within the timescales that has been stipulated in the local plan, that will enable us to actually address the kind of issues that we care for in terms of employment, in terms of skills, in terms of jobs that are high quality, good jobs, and in terms of the infrastructure we need to actually create a future generation that's actually proud to actually go forward and contribute to society. You will also know, some of you, at the next meeting of this council, Tracy will be here, who will be sharing her mayoral pledges, and we can also have a conversation with her. But I think the recovery plan is only as good as what we do at our local level. All the component authorities can only do their best. But one thing I will do, Mr. Mayor, is make sure that we put Kirklees first, and no matter who comes in the way, I will make sure that I challenge them and make sure that we sell what Kirklees does. And I think it's about time that we start celebrating the great success of this council. For years we didn't do anything and nobody said anything. Now we are doing stuff, and the only thing some of you can do is complain. Well, get behind us and tell us where we're going wrong, but don't whinge. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Mather, I believe you're going to speak in response to Councillor Bolt's comments.
Thank you, Councillor Bolt, for your interesting question. You're always quoting information a bit out of context. Why wouldn't I know about the New Roads and Resurfacing Act? And when we're talking about making sure that our district is fit for purpose and putting in place an infrastructure and raising the standards across the district, it means you have to make some investment. As I said previously, in terms of road surfaces, council cuts of 259 million, Tory cuts, backlog costing us 160 million. An investment programme which has fairly shared the money across the district, even in Murfield. Now, if you're saying you're fine, you don't need the money, can I have $500,000 back, please? Now, let me talk about resurfacing this particular road. Again, you're misleading people. it was made clear in all of the communication that went out about the resurfacing programme that it is aligned with the infrastructure programme that you're talking about. And you know, I believe for years you yourself have lobbied for this particular road to be resurfaced. So it's a bit bloody rich to be standing here and saying it shouldn't be done. So I say, you could, yes, I agree that whenever you resurface any particular roads, it's going to cause some disruption. But unless you're willing to take the short-term pain for long-term gain, I suggest you follow the program. And so doing nothing under this administration is not an option. So what we're doing is putting Kirklees on the map and being quite proud of it. So resurfacing A62 is a priority, it's an arterial road, and as you mentioned, it is being resurfaced and it will not be touched in relation to the infrastructure programme, which is aligned with this resurfacing. Thank you very much.
Councillor Bolt.
I would defer. A point of personal explanation for the benefit of the leader is when a speaker has been misunderstood by a subsequent speaker. And clearly, from what Councillor Mather was saying, she clearly misunderstood what I said about the new Road and Street Works Act. That specifies that the road should not be resurfaced. Now, I agree with the leader when he says for years they did nothing. I think we can all find some common ground with the leader, that for years you did nothing. And that's why the A62 resurfacing has got so close in time to the A62 major works. And if Councillor Mather, again, misunderstands and thinks that the road that has just been resurfaced is not going to be touched by the major scheme, then I suggest she looks at the plans, because clearly the new 77 million at the moment A62 scheme, it was 30 when they first raised it.
Councillor Bolt,
is over the top.
We've got the point of explanation.
So she clearly misunderstood, Mr. Mayor.
You can
Thank you.
sit down. That's very good. Thank you very much. So we're going on to item 9 now. Youth Justice Plan, page 17, reference from Cabinet. Councillor Kendrick, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In an attempt to project my voice as asked, I won't be turning and looking at you, but thank you. This item is relatively straightforward and I hope fairly quick in the interest of moving us on. This is the Kirklees Youth Justice Plan 2021-2025. It is a plan that is required to be done, and it's a statutory duty to have an annual plan as such. The report here before you gives an overview of the work and achievements for 1920 within this report under 3.1 and so on, right down to I think 3.10. It also highlights some things that the service is concerned about, that they have talked about prioritising and focusing on in the plan, and that's what this plan seeks to address. And following, if it is approved by Council, this plan will then go to the Youth Justice Board for England and Wales in accordance with the direction of the Secretary of State. So I am proposing that Council accepts this plan, but I am now going to alter the recommendations in the plan under 7.1 and 7.2. I'll say them fairly slowly so that you can grasp what it is I'm asking you to agree with. So under 7.1, that the recommendation of Cabinet, which happened yesterday, that the recommendation of Cabinet to approve the Youth Justice Plan 2021 to 2025 be agreed. And 7.2, that authority be delegated to the Service Director, Family Support and Child Protection to make any minor updates to the plan within the period 2021-2025. So I move that this be accepted.
Thank you, Councillor Kendrick. Is that seconded?
I'd like to second that and reserve the right, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Pandor. Are there any speakers on this? Councillor Lawson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll keep it brief. I agree. There's much to be spoken for in this report. I'd like to start by congratulating, panning out a little bit, and congratulating the council on its feedback from Ofsted after its recent focus visit. The CEO, the DCS, Mel Meggs, the staff, and Councillor Kendrick, those in scrutiny and corporate parenting seem to be turning the boat around, and it's very welcome to hear that news. Thanks to officers for bringing this report to us. One of the things that the bunch I've just mentioned has done successfully over the last couple of years is to approach issues with an honest, unflinching search for evidence, and then making improvements that need to be made swiftly. There's nothing in my mind that's contentious in the report. The facts speak for themselves. Overrepresentation of black and mixed ethnicity is quite rightly a piece of priority work. It needs to run alongside a wider work stream, but it's definitely something that should concern us. I'm appreciative that the plan hasn't deferred any work, which can often happen over a 4-year plan, beyond 2022 in its normal working year, so we have, in effect, a series of 1-year plans. But it seems as though it has been picked to fall in line with a financial plan. Indeed, it says that in the report, which is sensible enough. It just felt like that a 4-year plan ought to at least have a thumbnail sketch of what was to happen in subsequent years. Perhaps I'm splitting hairs here, being a little bit kind of pernickety, but it just felt as though there should be something there for later years. And because I can, I'll repeat the call for more central government money for early intervention and prevention. It's been cut by about 50% over the years. And if we can't support children who witness domestic violence, or are vulnerable to criminal gangs, or have mental health issues such as anxiety or low esteem or anger, then driving down the numbers of those first-time entrants is always going to be a struggle. I'm sure that's a repeated refrain on the YJS Management Board. The work is part and parcel of the Corporate Parenting Board, and we're sitting in a few days, and I'm glad to see that this is on there, and we'll drill down into the detail. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lawson. Any more? Councillor Butt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My part in this debate on youth justice is around the controversial PREVENT programme. PREVENT was started in 2011 as part of the overall counter-terrorism strategy contest. The aim was to reduce the threat to the UK from terrorism by stopping people becoming terrorists or supporting terrorism. Now, the basic tenet of what I'm talking about is not to demean the actual objective of PREVENT, but to talk about how far the well-intentioned programme has fallen into the sometimes ridiculous. In 2020, the data showed that there were 532 referrals to PREVENT for children under the age of 6, and a further 1,181 referrals between the ages of 6 and 9. Take the case of an 11-year-old boy whose teacher mistook the word arms, A-L-M-S, for arms, as in weapons. The teacher had asked the class the question that if they had lots of money, what would the children do with that money? And this 11-year-old boy said he would give alms to the oppressed and to poor people. The police concluded that there was no substance to this, no sign of radicalization, no extremist views, or any threat to national security, and the case was closed. His mother is a dentist, his father is an engineer. So what is the impact on the family? What is the psychological impact to the whole family and on the child? The family subsequently sued the local authority and the school. And what happened to the child's record, which is probably tarnished? Let's take the case of a 4-year-old who drew a picture of his father in the kitchen cutting a cucumber. Innocent as it seems. When asked by the teacher or the nursery staff what the picture depicted, his pronunciation was quite unfortunate of the word cucumber. And it was taken as cooker bomb and was referred to Prevent. When staff were approached by the parents about the referral, the mother asked, "Do we look like terrorists? And does this 4-year-old child look like a terrorist?" To which the nursery staff responded to, "Did Jimmy Savile look like a paedophile?" In conclusion, Mr. Mayor, we must work with the Prevent strategy, as the objective is a noble one. And given the murder of Sir David Amis, and a few days ago, the Liverpool bombing, it is vital that we have a comprehensive strategy in combating radicalization in young people, but we mustn't allow Prevent and such measures to become a means of cracking a nut with a sledgehammer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Buck. Councillor David Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just on the substance of the report, I have to admit I didn't know a lot about this issue before this paper came out. And unusually for an outside body, it doesn't seem to have any councillors on it. We don't have a member on the Youth Offending Partnership. I don't know if there are any members on it. And then later on, it also refers to the Youth Justice Management Board, which I don't think has any members on it either. So when I read this report for the first time, which was in the Cabinet papers for yesterday, I was somewhat in the dark of the background behind a lot of what it talked about. And therefore hadn't really had much time either to get a briefing on it or to scrutinise it. And it also seems to me that given that the plan is mostly, and the strategies at play are mostly funded by the council, it did seem odd to me that we don't seem to have a councillor on this body. And because of that, my recommendation to the group was that we neither support nor vote against this report, because in the substance of it, we don't find anything major in there to disagree with. But we just feel that we don't know enough about the subject or haven't had a briefing on it to be able to vote for the plan as a whole. Can I thank Councillor Kendrick, though, for answering the questions that I did pose at Cabinet, which make sense to me now. It does seem to me, I'm sure I'm not the only one that knows little about this particular subject, it does seem to me it would make a satisfactory key issue for a further council at a subsequent council meeting, because it does seem to me that having read what's in this plan, it does deal with some extremely important things, and perhaps as councillors we ought to know more about it, and maybe even we ought to have an input into it at an earlier stage. So I would ask that we look into that, and whether leading members perhaps could pick that up. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Richard Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was going to speak on this for quite a while, but I'm trying to keep it more brief. Thank you for the report. I visited the Youth Justice Service, and it's a very interesting place to go to, and there's a lot more to this than originally meets the eye. We're all corporate parents after all. So, there's a lot of interlinking between, various things, looked after children, etc. So there isn't an awful lot in the report that I would disagree with, but there are a couple of areas I think perhaps, maybe missed opportunities. It's clear that there are common themes why children may be interacting with the Youth Justice Service. There are the obvious ones, households that are exposed to domestic violence, households experiencing economic hardship, possibly lone parent households, perhaps. I don't know, but these kind of issues. So the other things, such as the geographical location of where people grow up. So some areas will clearly have more of an issue with gangs, where older youths may become role models. If we ever, as a society and us as councillors, wish, as I'm sure we all do, to give all young people the best possible start in life, to get a good education leading to a successful career, we need to look at why some young people may not have positive role models to look up to. It was easy for me because when I was a young person, I had a dad that was, always out at work, and I saw, that was a way to proceed, in life, get an education, get a skill, get a job, all the rest of it. But if people are influenced by, the wrong kind of role model, then it's quite clearly going to be a dangerous precedent for people to go and follow, if someone's got nice clothes at a young age and they're mixing with the wrong criminal sort of elements, then it's obvious where that leads to if there isn't a positive role model. So all of this stuff, it's really relevant to me. My view is it's fairly similar to health in that the key to this is early intervention. And I agree with a lot of what Councillor Lawson said earlier. The way to deal with children falling into criminality is to address these risks early on. So there is a short paragraph about early support, but it's fairly brief and it says very little about how children at risk of offending are identified or how any additional support is provided or focused. It does mention family coaches, domestic violence practitioners, family group conferencing, etc., etc. This is all positive, but I believe this is the key to the whole issue. So instead of being stuck sort of a small paragraph at the end of the report, after page of figures, statistics, percentages, etc., it seems to me to sort of miss the point a little bit. But, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Are there any more speakers on this? Yes, Councillor. Councillor Ahmed, I haven't forgotten your name. I'm just recovering.
From the early meetings. I'd just like to welcome the report because it's a passion of mine, because I've been working for the Youth Justice Board for a number of years now, and I think it's important. I really welcome the work Viv and the other members have done, and working with young people, and in terms of the criminality sort of stuff, it's fascinating to see some of the stuff that this report highlights. And I do take on board what you said, Councillor Hall, and in terms of having that member input, and also about council having quite significant investment in that, because somebody who's worked with young people through prisons, through youth offending, through young offenders, children's homes, I know the impact it has on families, young people. In terms of CSC, and also in terms of child criminal exploitation, which is a big thing now. And I know county lines, human trafficking, drug dealing, there is significant element in terms of the work that's going on. So it's important. I personally looked at the report and I've read it, and I think there's a lot of work that's in there, and there's a lot of work we as members, and I take on board what you've just said, Richard, about a responsibility for us as corporate parents. We're all corporate parents and we've all got that responsibility, and I think the report highlights some of that as well, and I think it's for us to do the work. So for me personally, I welcome the report. I do think there's still some work to be done, but I see my colleague Councillor Kendrick is doing that with obviously Mel Meggs and others that are leading on that. I'm happy to support wherever I can in terms of my own professional experience, and I've been in this field of work now for 15, 20 years, so happy to offer that if it's needed. Thank you for that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ahmed. Any more questions, comments? Councillor Pandor, you reserve the right. Do you want to speak? No. Councillor Kendrick, then.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Once again, I'll stand with my back to you, but not without respect. I'm really happy and delighted to hear the interest from colleagues in the room. John Lawson, what would happen in subsequent years? Am I splitting hairs? Yeah, perhaps you are, John, but there we are. The requirement is to produce a one-year plan. That's the legal requirement. They've tried to go further. A lot of the things that are in this coming year's plan will appear again and again, because these aren't problems with a quick fix, but it is how the service continues to work forward. Thank you for your contribution on Prevent, Councillor Butt. I'm not going to go any further with that. It's an interesting point that Councillor David Hall raised about council involvement in it. I mean, this is a council service which reports to corporate parenting, so there are councillors on corporate parenting who will be involved in that. And I have to say, I think has already been mentioned, Children's Scrutiny Panel members have been out and spent some time with the Youth Justice Service, which I'm really grateful for, because, you know, it helps triangulate what I think I know. I'm not against further councillor involvement, and I'll take that back for discussion, but, you know, it isn't something in my gift, if you like, at this moment. Councillor Richard Smith, early intervention, you're absolutely right, is absolutely key. It won't work for everybody. It's why we have the families together. You know, what were the family hubs? It's why we have family group conferencing. It's why we have multi-systemic therapy, where we can identify young people on the edge of getting into the youth justice system. We can do something there, hopefully. And obviously, our future investment, or our further current investment in youth services will help perhaps with some of that identification. It is an uphill battle, but you're absolutely right, that is what is required, and it is what the service is trying to focus on. And Councillor Ahmed, thank you for your kind comments.
Thank you, Councillor Kendrick. We will now go to the vote. Show of hands, please. All those in favour? Any against? Abstentions? That's carried. Thank you. Now we go to item 10. Page 71, Network Rail, Transpennine Route Upgrade, Transport and Works Act Order, Submission Update, Council Withdrawal of Objection. This item is for information only. Members of the Council will be invited to make any comments after we've received a presentation from David Shepherd, Strategic Director for Growth and Regeneration. Can I now invite David to give his presentation? Thank you.
Members of the Council, I'm pleased to speak to you today and report back to full Council on progress that's been made around the negotiations with Network Rail, particularly the Transport and Works Act order. Just bear with me. So, if members remember, we did have the discussion previously at full Council, and we set out there that there was a need to move into negotiations, particularly backed by the objection that members agreed to, and that gave the team an opportunity to work with Network Rail. The opportunity was around ensuring that people of Kirklees were benefiting from the £1.56 billion worth of investment, as well as commuters passing through Kirklees. That was really important at the beginning of this process, and it continues to be an important issue. What I would also say to members is that we are currently in the period of a public inquiry, so this is very pertinent around this issue, but also I think we're all expecting an announcement from government later this week with regards to the rail plan for the integrated rail plan for the north. So it's a very big issue in terms of rail investment in this part of the country, but in particular in Kirklees. So in terms of the objection, you as full council made it clear that at any point up to the public inquiry, the council could withdraw that objection to the Transport and Works Act order. And obviously that's resulted in a series of negotiations. And since that council endorsement in July, there's been numerous detailed workshops. So my staff and other staff within the council have worked with the Network Rail team to ensure that each of the points that you'd set out at full council in July were addressed. There were a significant amount of concerns that were raised through those extensive negotiations, but I'm pleased to say that all of those concerns have been addressed to my satisfaction, and I'm pleased to report that back to you. And that's resulted in the withdrawal of the objection to the Transport and Works Act order. But rather than just skip through that, I think it's important that we just remind you of the concerns that you raised and wanted the council officer team to address with Network Rail on behalf of the people and businesses of Kirklees. So there were environment and biodiversity concerns, there were climate change concerns and noise and air quality concerns, and I will go through the others as well, but the issues were all addressed by a combination of measures. So you'll see on these slides that for some of the concerns, we've come to an agreement that planning conditions need to be put in place because the works won't take place for quite some time. On others, we've agreed through legal side agreements, which obviously were the process of negotiation, but have resulted in legal and binding side agreements with Network Rail. We've also achieved statements of common ground, which have been submitted to the public inquiry that's going on at the present time. And in some cases, we've agreed commuted sums that Network Rail will pay for the impact of some of the works and ensure that the management and all the aspects coming out of that are addressed not to the expense of Kirklees Council or any of our businesses, but obviously that Network Rail pick up those costs. So you will see on this slide how we've dealt with those issues through legal side agreements, commuted sums, statements of common ground for the issues of environment and biodiversity, climate change, noise and air quality. We also addressed issues of highways disruption because these are significant works. You can't spend £1.56 billion even in an area as big as Kirklees without having significant disruption. So we need to ensure that our highways continue running, and if there's diversions needed, they're put in place in the appropriate way. And we needed to make sure that all those protocols were agreed in advance rather than just not necessarily leaving it to chance, but leaving it to a later date. We needed to ensure that those protocols were in place now. Similarly, for large schemes such as Dewsbury Riverside, we're looking at siting upwards of 4,000 homes on that development. So it's absolutely critical where there's an impact as a result of the rail infrastructure and the works that are happening on Dewsbury Riverside, that we are able to deliver the amount of housing on that particular portion of the site that was originally envisaged. Otherwise, I'm sure you'll all appreciate that we would have to find other sites for that housing. So it was important that Network Rail understood that and located their infrastructure appropriately, and we've been able to agree a statement of common ground on that one. The A62 Leeds Road Bridge, again, that's been talked about previously tonight, but there is a need for widening and effectively replacement of that bridge, and it's very important that the council doesn't get landed with the original construction bill, but also the upkeep and maintenance of that, because that is a considerable bill moving into the future, because the inspection can only be done by the Network Rail staff, and it is, as I say, a considerable bill, and one that I'm pleased to say that we negotiated that, and Network Rail have changed their position on that one, and they've accepted that that is their responsibility now and moving into the future as well. And the operation and waste recycling sites. We know that people in Kirklees rely on the operation and waste recycling sites, and we need to ensure that that access to them and the operations of them are maintained. And if there's any disruption, that is at the cost of Network Rail rather than on Kirklees Council. Similarly, heritage assets are being addressed through this. So we have viaducts in Dewsbury, and we need to ensure that that's dealt with appropriately and doesn't come back to Kirklees Council unnecessarily. And similarly, development management and minerals and waste management issues have been dealt with through statements of common ground and planning conditions. So in conclusion then, I'll remind you that, which you know already, Kirklees Council was always supportive of the wider principles of this investment for the Transport and Works Act order. That was never in doubt, and we made that very clear to Network Rail throughout the whole of this process. But what Kirklees Council wanted to be heard, but also acted upon, with the legitimate concerns, which I've just quickly whipped through, I appreciate, but the report's there, and you've had the previous reports as well, in order to avoid substantial costs for Kirklees Council, but also unnecessary disruption for the residents and businesses of Kirklees. It remains vital that this investment benefits all of the people of Kirklees, and I'll go back to what I said at the beginning, that it's not just for the commuters' benefit passing through, and electrification has fantastic benefits of moving more people on rail, but it's not just for those people moving through Kirklees that need to benefit from 1.56 billion. It's the people here and the businesses here that also need to see the benefits as well. My final point is that your unanimous position in terms of the objection put me and my team in the strongest possible position for negotiating the best outcome with Network Rail. And I thank you for that, but I just wanted to report back to you today how that's worked in practice. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, David. Councillor McBride.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. David's given you a full picture. This appeared to be like a trivial thing. It's a technical objection, and so that might seem to be not important. It was technical because of the amounts of money concerned and the number of issues. There are about 10 issues, and David outlined what they were. We seem to have got our way, or seem to be have each of our concerns addressed fully and in cost terms. So there's something significantly achieved. But I would add, just to the back end of what David was saying, the disturbance while this is being done is going to be huge. And I think we're going to have to be massively patient. And I'm sure there'll be loads and loads of questions coming backwards and forward as this scheme is developed. As David said, 1.5 billion invested over a limited area is bound to cause massive disruptions. And I'm told that as that's the key parts of this going in, there could be something like 38 weeks of disruption. That what they will attempt to do, I think, will be not to have consecutive 38 weeks. It'll be, they'll try to do work at the weekends, and they will also try to do it in blocks. So there'll be reliefs and then blocks again, etc. But during that period, it's going to be very painful, and I think the public might well think, is it worth it? We know in the long term it is worth it for all concerned, but the disturbance is going to be enormous, and I just warn people that that is going to be true and necessary to achieve what we want. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McBride. Are there any comments? Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This was a decision that was taken by full council, and so really it should have come back to full council for full council to confirm that we were comfortable with the objection being withdrawn. That didn't happen. I understand the sensitivities. I'd like to start by thanking David and the officers that worked on this, because I'm sure these have been difficult negotiations that have gone on for a significant period of time. And echo the comments that have already been made about how supportive we are of this upgrade. But I do think, as council and councillors, we haven't really been given very much information about what has been agreed. We've seen the report. The report lists the wards that are impacted by this activity, but it doesn't appear that any of those councillors have been involved or had any information provided to them in advance of today either. So I do think there is a missing piece here. And personally, I understand this isn't the sort of thing that you can have the whole council involved with and discussing and understanding a little more detail. So what I'd like to propose is to refer this item for further consideration to the Economy and Neighbourhoods Scrutiny meeting and use Standing Order 15, paragraph 4 to do that. I'm not saying we change the decisions, but I do think as councillors, residents would expect us to know a little more detail about what has been agreed. And at the moment, I don't think anybody could say. So I think giving scrutiny an opportunity to scrutinise this is probably the right place and the right way to ensure that councillors get a bit more information and have more understanding of what has been agreed. I have no doubt it's all fine, but I think we need to allow councillors to play their role. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Just hang on a minute. There might be an opportunity to come back at the end. I'm just seeking advice on that, Councillor McBride. Okay, so the illegal advice is, Councillor Taylor, that's a motion you've just proposed. It's got to be seconded and put to the vote. Are you seconding it, Councillor Bolt? Councillor Bolt, are you seconding it? Are you seconding it? Okay, okay.
Thank Mr. Shepherd for his presentation. And doing so, I wish that would have been able to be circulated before the meeting or put on our tables, because certainly, Mr. Mayor, I don't know what other colleagues felt, but with the lighting in here and the size of the script, I found it difficult to read all the points. So I hope that can be circulated after. Again, let's be clear that we all want to see the investment in railways, but the impact on our communities has to be understood. And unfortunately, at this moment, and the reason why I'm seconding what Councillor Taylor said is we haven't got that clarity. We haven't got any clarity towards the specifics of the communities it affects. Specifics, Mr. Mayor, which were outlined in the council decision we took in July. Those specifics were tabulated, and not surprisingly, Mr. Mayor, they referred to Murfield, hence why I'm very concerned and supportive of further scrutiny. Those specifics do not appear in the same detail in the tabulation in this report. So, looking at some of the issues, 10 points of concern in July. The Council also agreed to include reference to greenways and allow public elected members to attend the public inquiry. That decision, and John has alluded to it, that decision that we made, I've got the paper here if you wish it, Mr. Mayor, did not include any delegation agreement. One cannot assume delegation when the Council has taken a decision. We've heard earlier on today about delegating things to officers for the next few years. The Council took that decision. The specifics were there, what it said, and that is in items 4 to 7 of the July presentation. The issue alluded to decision making is also encapsulated, Mr. Mayor, in our standing orders in the motion to rescind a previous decision. Having made a decision, if we wish to rescind it, that would have been something that full council on a motion signed by at least 10 members would have had to do. That's because there are safeguards in place, Mr. Mayor. I've looked through. I was told that this was something that was covered in the scheme of officer delegations, Mr. Mayor. I can't find it in an officer delegation scheme, Section F of the Constitution, where it gives the power to officers to rescind a decision of council. In fact, I suggest, Mr. Mayor, that the scheme of delegation on the website is probably out of date, because I don't think it truly reflects. It still talks on the website about the Strategic Director for Economy and Infrastructure. I think that was Carl Battersby, who was left a few years ago. So our information needs updating so that it's clear for us all what we're doing. The report before us on item 10 says that ward members were briefed. Certainly, Mr. Mayor, and it's been alluded to, ward members in Mirfield were not briefed or consulted on the removal of this objection or any specifics. The report before us doesn't give any insight into if and how the detrimental effects on roads, rights-of-way and greenways are being mitigated by these agreements. All it says is agreements have been reached, legal undertakings. We need that clarity. Anybody reading the agenda item is equally unaware and in the dark about traffic displacement, which will occur. There's no details about what's been arranged about diversions and, crucially, HGV deliveries. During part of this, when Combridge Road is closed, HGV diversions will come through Huddersfield, out towards Waterloo and over Kirklees. So those members, I would suggest, need to be looking at the diversion routes for large HGVs which can't fit under railway bridges in Mirfield. So if there's any members here that represent the Dalton ward, they might want to have a look at that, Mr. Mayor, and see how those HGVs are going to go up Kirklees over the humps.
30 seconds.
Thanks. So as I say, the concern no way contradicts, and our formal objection did not minimise our support and ambition for better public transport. It strengthened that stance and ensured that we could be there with the debate, Mr. Mayor. I would welcome, and I hope the Council will support, that this comes back for scrutiny. Admitted it is after the event, and hopefully we can learn in future to abide by Council decisions. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bolt. So speaking on this motion, which is to refer this to scrutiny for further consideration, Councillor McBride first.
Chairman, can I assure Council there's no conspiracy, that the information that I have, that Councillor Bolt wants and that others members want, cannot be given at this point while the inquiry is taking place. More widely, he and any others concerned can find out any information which has so far been forthcoming. He could be informed of that on a limited basis, so he could be informed and other members who are equally concerned, but it cannot be widely broadcast while the inquiry is continuing, which will be true for a week or so. So I hope that assures you, and there is no need to go through this. There's no conspiracy to hide anything. And I assure you, we know the amount of pain, the amount of pressure there will be when you're doing this amount of work. The impact will be enormous. And yes, you will be kept fully involved. And if you weren't, I'm sure you would ensure that we were, by virtue of objections and so on. Of course, we'll be totally involved in this process. I think we're really involved because it'll so affect and concern us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McBride. Councillor Marchington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we're fully supportive of making as much information available to all members as possible. It was quite interesting when we had the meeting here a few weeks ago about where we're going to move towards the committee system, and that was one of the discussions we had, and particularly pre-decision scrutiny. But I think there's also a concern from our group about the timeliness of this and delaying anything, and also how it might have an impact on the public inquiry. We appreciate that. So whilst we might think that we might support some of this information, as much information as possible going to scrutiny, I don't think we'd support a reference back if that delays the process today. But there is an important point, and what I would ask, and it might be a small group of members, it might include the members of the relevant scrutiny panel, to have the same information available to them as has been available to members of the Cabinet, on the understanding that that information is made available so it doesn't prejudice any particular position the Council might take. That's fine, Peter, if that's right. The public inquiry. Because that is, I think that's the stage we need to get to, and I think all members would appreciate that, to have access to the same information that members of Cabinet have, but on the understanding that's used to inform us about our role, all 69 of us, our role in running this council, representing our wards, but also making sure we're making decisions on behalf of the 423,000 people who live in Kirklees. So I don't think we support a reference back, but we do think that all the information is provided to councillors, and that we might decide that as the scrutiny councillors. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marchington. Councillor Pandor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just trying to seek some clarification from John. I completely understand what you're saying, John, but just so I'm clear, are we saying we have an informal session with scrutiny members, and maybe Julie can advise us in terms of how we move forward? Because I understand what members are saying, but at the same time, there's some time scales, and we want to make sure that we don't lag behind, because it is a big investment. So, Julie, advice and just maybe some clarification. So, Julie.
You've got a right of reply, Councillor Taylor.
Sorry, just to clarify, because I think there's some misunderstanding about what I'm proposing. I'm not proposing to change the decision. The decision has been made. What I'm saying is we need to have a small group of members who have an opportunity to look at that in more detail, to give us confidence and comfort that we understand what has been discussed, because at the moment that information isn't available to any members. We talked about we've had a full picture, but I don't think we have. So I think it can't be a public meeting because of the public inquiry, but it doesn't mean we can't have the appropriate members. Now, for me, the scrutiny committee would be probably the right place, but if we want to suggest an alternative, I don't mind. But that's what I'm suggesting, is we need to have a small group of members that have the opportunity to have that dialogue and discussion that hasn't happened to date. That's what I'm proposing. So I think people have misunderstood what I was suggesting. I'm not suggesting we change the decision or we defer a decision. We can't defer the decision. The decision has been made anyway. It's more about ensuring that members have some involvement and have a better understanding of what's being discussed. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
A legal officer to speak.
Just to clarify, of course, scrutiny can ask to review executive actions in relation to... Oh, you're telling me you can't hear me? Sorry. Apologies. I can hear myself very loudly up here, and I'm echoing, so I'm really sorry. Yes, of course, scrutiny can ask to review what's happened. Of course, it's not going to change the decision, but and I would recommend that it is in private, because there are likely to be a number of things which David Shepherd's already alluded to in relation to the inquiry that's continuing in relation to other parts of the proposals. So, of course, and I can see Councillor Smage nodding, they can ask for a review, and I think you've proposed that it would be the neighbourhood panel, the Economy and Neighbourhoods panel.
So it probably all comes down to wording. But before we get to that, Councillor Uppal wants to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I won't look to you either, but thank you. Just to get things progressing, I'm the chair of the Economies and Neighbourhood Scrutiny Panel. I don't have any problem with this coming to our panel. Obviously, a decision has been made. we just need to look at our timetable a little bit. We're struggling with time as it is, as a panel, as many panels are, but as we're looking at a private meeting, let's try and get something timetabled in. I don't particularly have a problem with that. I'm sure you would be okay with that as well. David's nodding along. Peter, you know, let's have a look at it. It's not particularly a problem, I don't think, so happy to agree with that. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Uppal. So the motion, correct me if I'm wrong, is to refer this back to scrutiny for consideration in private. Is that sufficient? Councillor Smage. Let's have Councillor Smage up as Chair of Scrutiny.
As I understand it, it's not to change the decision, and therefore it shouldn't be a referral back to scrutiny. It should be a acceptance by scrutiny to put it on the work programme and to have it as an item. Councillor Uppal, as the Economy and Neighbourhoods Scrutiny Lead member, has agreed to put it on their work programme and will liaise with officers to put it at an appropriate place for all members of that panel to be able to have that information that has been agreed, that presumably Councillor McBride will agree to, that scrutiny can look at that information in an appropriate format, and therefore it is agreed by scrutiny to look at that item. Thank you.
Just to clarify again, when I spoke initially, I never said refer back. I said refer it to scrutiny so they could clarify and look at it further. So it wasn't referring it back. It was just saying, let's let scrutiny have a look at this. Thank you.
Just be patient, Councillor Simpson. We know you're waiting. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to make the point that I think we're overcomplicating it slightly. If scrutiny have agreed to look at it as part of their work programme and everyone's agreed, we don't need a resolution at all. It's going to go there. We can just accept the report and scrutiny will look at it.
Yes, we know that, Councillor Simpson. We just need the motion, the people that put the motion, Councillor Taylor, to agree to that. He's going to agree to that, so we don't need a vote. Councillor Bull.
On advice given before that to change the motion when it's already been put has to require a vote anyway. That's what I was advised about actually this motion in July, that when the leader accepted a drafting amendment, I was told it had to be voted on, which we've never done. So to rescind a motion requires, it does require complete. It's easy just to vote on it, Mr. Mayor. I thought we've got to formally rescind it.
Councillor Taylor, I'm advised that you can just withdraw your motion. Yeah, so there's no motion on the table, so there's nothing to vote on. Okay, thank you. Right. Does anybody else want to speak? Councillor McBride. Quickly, because don't complicate it.
There is no conspiracy at all. It's simply to take account of and have regard for the process of the inquiry. And therefore, you can't have a sort of publication of what's got an ongoing public inquiry, which is supposed to be not in public. So it isn't a question of trying to hide it. I've seen it. Believe me, you will not learn a great deal more, and you'll not be, you'll not be deprived of any significant information that's going to help you. I assure you, if you want the information, you can have it, but we just can't widely distribute it. It's as simple as that.
So for the purposes of the minutes of the council meeting, I am advised the report is noted with a caveat that scrutiny have accepted it'll go on the programme to be discussed in private. Happy?
Right, everybody's happy, so I'm happy. We'll move on to item 11 then. Written questions to the Leader, Cabinet members, chairs of committees and nominated spokespersons. We have 30 minutes in total on this item. A written schedule of submitted questions has been circulated. I will now invite members to ask their questions in turn, and the appropriate member will respond. One supplementary question to each submitted question is permitted. Straightforward, simple. We should be able to adhere to it, hopefully. So question 1, please. Councillor Warner.
Right. Okay, I'm struggling to hear a bit, so I'm just checking that everyone can hear me. I mean, I'm the one with the hearing problem. Great. Yeah, I was about to say now for something really simple, which is sorting out the climate emergency. Our Prime Minister, taking the words of David Attenborough, had stated at the beginning of the COP26 conference that the world is at 1 minute to midnight. Yet the final agreed statement from COP26 shows that the world is not on target to reduce emissions sufficiently to avoid potential global climate disasters. Does the Cabinet now agree that as governments can no longer be relied upon to find solutions to the climate emergency, the time has come for councils, in particular this council, to stand up and take a major lead on climate change rather than tinkering at the edges? If so, could they suggest bold, innovative moves that could set an example to the rest of the country and give hope to our young people that a safer future is possible?
Councillor Simpson.
Sorry that this isn't simple or straightforward, Mr Mayor, but there's 2 questions in the question. Are we treating that as a question supplementary or as a single question?
That's a single question.
Okie dokie, thank you. Firstly, Councillor Warner, thank you very much for your timely question following the conclusion of COP26. COP26 has shown us that we need bold global leadership and action to cut carbon emissions to meet the 1.5 degree warming aspiration, and we're not there yet. Our Cabinet does already stand up and take a lead on tackling the climate emergency. We significantly overachieved against the climate target set for the Council in 2010 of achieving a 40% reduction in our emissions by 2020. We in fact achieved a 53.5% reduction in our emissions. This is much more than tinkering around the edges, but we will not rest on our laurels. There is so much more to do. We now have a much more ambitious target, one more ambitious than the national and international targets, and we are absolutely committed to achieving that. Whilst for some COP26 itself hasn't delivered everything they hoped to achieve, it has been an opportunity for us as Kirklees Council to engage residents, businesses and partners and share our message about building a greener Kirklees. Only last week the Council held a COP26 regional roadshow event in the form of a green market outside Dewsbury Town Hall, and this gave us an opportunity to showcase some of the proactive green initiatives whilst also promoting our local partners from across Kirklees involved in local climate conscious actions and enterprises. Some highlights included the showcasing of a new council electric vehicle, a fully electric waste refuse vehicle demo, e-bikes on display, as well as advisors giving information on air quality, electric cars, waste and recycling, food sustainability, upcycling, fast fashion, and getting into the great outdoors. In addition to this, Kirklees Council, in partnership with the Climate Commission, our Kirklees Climate Commission, also hosted an online COP26 live webinar event on the 11th of November to officially launch our Climate Commission. This included videos and presentations of local climate actions and initiatives and a Q&A session with commissioners to give people an opportunity to find out more about the Commission, how it started, its future plans, and to hear about some of the more impactful work and projects that they're involved with locally. The launch of the Commission has been one of our many Phase 1 climate emergency actions. Kirklees is playing its part to tackle climate change in cutting ours and the district's carbon emissions, but our climate change actions do not end at Phase 1. As you allude to, Councillor Warner, there is much more to do and work is ongoing to develop our next phase of actions, including the development and publication of a Kirklees District Net Zero Roadmap, which is being informed by some of the UK's leading climate academics and a climate action plan as well. I look forward to returning to Council in the new year with our net zero roadmap for the district, which will be another step forward in the fight against climate change. But in the meantime, I can announce that we intend to again hold our Climate Youth Festival in the coming year, and I'd like to invite you, Councillor Warner, to be part of that and to bring your passion and enthusiasm to what I hope will be another successful event.
Thank you. Is there a supplementary?
Yes, yes, please. I mean, I agree that quite several initiatives are happening, but would the council agree, and I'm sorry, this is a cliche, but if we keep doing what we've always done, we're going to get what we've always got. And I don't believe, and I would like to know how many of us do, that we will ever keep pace with the growth of the car. So surely the time has come to lobby for change in the way transport funds are awarded both nationally and regionally, so that millions can be invested in sustainable transport, especially cheaper and more regular buses, trains and bike lanes is the way forward. Basically, actions, not words. I'm actually tempted to say no more blah, 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 but I don't wish to insult members of the council.
So what's the question?
So, the question is, don't you agree that we can never keep up with the growth of the car, and that we ought to be lobbying to see if we can use funds allocated for road improvements for more going into sustainable transport, rather than just seeing that the funds should be going purely and simply to road improvements? That it's actually the cars, getting more people off cars, more regular buses, cheaper buses, more bike lanes is the way we're going to help the climate.
Yes, Leslie, part of our roadmap will no doubt be about the importance of a modal shift in transport. That doesn't mean the elimination of the private car entirely, but it cannot make up, the proportion of our transport it makes up now. And that does need to change, and we need more investment in active travel, we need more investment in our buses, we need more investment in our trains. We need to make sure that the government delivers on the promises it's made about rail to the north to ensure that we can deliver that active travel and that modal shift. And I am more than happy to lobby government to ensure that we have further funds to deliver on that.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Question 2, question by Councillor Munro to the Cabinet Member, Councillor Mather.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My first question to Councillor Mather. Please can you tell me why the council will not provide a litter bin in Lepton at Green Bulk Lane by the church?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Munro. There is an ongoing monitoring programme to look at the possibility of placing a litter bin at this location. Initially, this was denied as the request was for a bin to collect dog waste. Dog waste bins are not provided by Kirklees Council, as dog waste is classed as hazardous waste, and we have limitations when collecting and disposing of this waste. The street scene team are looking into the possibility of placing a bin here, as there is finite capacity to empty the approximately 8,000 litter bins within the district. We are currently using our road sweeper, which visits this area twice weekly to report to the team leaders responsible for our litter bins after every visit. Site visits have been conducted and will continue to monitor this area. I believe the residents are litter picking, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the residents for doing this. We know this because whenever we are attending the site, we're not finding the litter, as this has already been collected. So thank you for all the residents. And Councillor Munro, I wonder if you would like to join me in a campaign to ask people to take their litter home instead. Thank you.
Any supplementary?
Sorry, I can't hear what you're saying. This is a bit. Thank you, Councillor Mather, for your response. I've just been handed a photograph of a litter and dog waste bin that's been put in the Kirkburton ward. Do you have anything to say about? I can just show you that's a photograph of it.
And like I said, we are trying to place the litter bin, and I will also ask the officers if anything further can be done. What I said was there was a confusion between a bin or dog litter waste. I didn't say we wouldn't place a bin.
But we actually need both because we've got a dog poo problem and a litter problem.
And I will get the officers to look
Councillor
into
Taylor.
this.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'd just like to say thank you, and it's good to hear that the council are actually considering putting a litter bin there, because litter stroke dog waste litter bin there, because it's so badly needed and it's been needed for a long time. So thank you. I hope we can resolve this issue quickly.
I'm sure we can.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Question 3.
Okay.
Question by Councillor Munro to the Cabinet Member for Learning, Aspiration and Communities, Councillor Petition.
We heard last week that the expansion works at King James's School are behind schedule due to delays in supply of building materials. Please can you tell me when you now anticipate the works to be completed?
Councillor Munro, can I thank you for your question, and can I firstly say, as both the letter from the school and the authority to parents said, that our first concern is the education of King James's children, and we are deeply saddened that the children being educated at the old Almondbury Community School site did not join the rest of the school on the King James's site in September as planned, and now of course a revised target of December will be missed also. The school chose to continue the education of what was last year's Year 7 and now Year 8 on the Almondbury site to maintain some consistency in their education and to ensure as little as disruption as possible to that particular year group. You will recall that the decision to close the Almondbury Community School was taken in the summer of 2019. And it was then anticipated that the Almondbury Community School would be at the disposal of King James's to use as they saw fit for a year from September 20 to September 21, and they were also given the opportunity to extend that for a little while longer if needs be. And of course that needs be has come to pass, because the one thing we had no idea about in the summer of 2019 was that COVID-19 would come along, nor how the exit from Europe would affect us all. So just in the light of both of those issues, I have to say that the school, the developers, the council's asset management team and school services have done an excellent job in getting the new block to the stage it is at. Windows in, roof on, internal works happening, and the connection of services is all happening. It was no mean feat to be at that point, at this point, given the many hurdles the development has faced, from the initial call-in to delays caused by highway infrastructure agreements, to global supply chain issues, to the availability of staff and employees, either due to COVID or a lack of skilled workers due to Brexit. All the things that have hit the rest of society, the shortages in our shops, the lack of service in the hospitality sector, and the lack of materials on other building projects have affected this scheme. It's not immune. So I repeat, I congratulate all concerned in getting the scheme to near completion, but it would also be unfair to speculate when that completion date may be reached. Suffice it to say, the council is working closely with the school and the contractors to establish a revised programme which sees Year 8 pupils educated with the rest of the school on the King James's site at the earliest opportunity.
Thank you. I have a supplementary question, if that's all right, Mr. Mayor. I understand the cost of building materials has increased recently by 8%. Please can you therefore tell me if the development will still come in on budget?
That I cannot tell you at all, I'm afraid. I'm sure that the contract that was taken out in 2019 or placed in 2019, I'm sure it had some clauses in it which actually did prevent price increases, but at the same time things have changed so much since 2019. But I can ask that question for you and get you that information.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Question 4 by Councillor Munro to the Cabinet Member for Culture and Greener Kirklees, Councillor Simpson.
Hello. I was notified recently that £153 million of funding has been made available through the Cultural Investment Fund for museums and galleries. Please can you tell me if the Council has applied for a share of this funding to upgrade Tellson Museum buildings and its facilities?
Thank you, Councillor Munro, for your question. So this funding programme isn't yet open for applications. We're waiting for some further information from the funding bodies about the programme. What I do know from some of the information that's been shared is that much of this is going to national museums or has been allocated already through Levelling Up funding projects. When the funding programme does open, we'll be able to check the criteria, seek advice from the funder and consider priorities for our museums and galleries, assessing their current building investment needs and future plans to determine which applications will be made.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I don't have a supplementary to that one. Thank you.
Thank you. Question 5 by Councillor Cooper to the Leader of the Council, Councillor Pandor.
How many applications for awards has the Council made over the last 2 years? How many have resulted in shortlisting? How many have been winners?
Thank you, Councillor Cooper, for that question. I've got written responses somewhere. Can I ask Councillor Paul Davis, who has this portfolio, to share with Councillor Cooper what you know about this? Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks again, Councillor Cooper, for raising this question. So, in the past, I'll give you 4 years, not 2 years. You'll get double the information.
That's
good.
Great.
We've submitted 127 awards, submissions. We've been nominated as finalists for 56, and we've won 30 awards. But I think the point to make is that this is not just about those numbers. It is actually about us striving for excellence as a council, and obviously that's the level of service we want to see for our residents. Another thing with this whole process is that awards are a very good way of motivating our staff. They learn best practice, and it's also building a culture of excellence. And I know a number of you have raised concerns recently around recruitment, and certainly award-winning services and award-winning councils are in a very good space for attracting great staff. And that's absolutely something we want to be doing going forward. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to put on record our thanks to staff across the council who are doing some fantastic work for our residents. And just take a minute or two to talk about one or two of the awards. And the first one I'll mention is our school catering team. Don't often get talked about school catering, but these were recognised last month in a national award as providing an excellent service with regards to delivering a varied and healthy diet, which we know is so important for our young people across Kirklees. The leader mentioned somebody a little bit earlier on, Suraj Mayat, who just in the past week has scooped HR Champion of the Year, not just at national level, at European level. That was around his work with apprenticeships. It was bringing in people who had been excluded in the past. So some of this work is not just effective work, it's really inspiring work. Our recycling and waste team have been recognised for the fantastic work they've done through the pandemic. And our libraries have had a number of awards, one of which is they were awarded a Library of Sanctuary, whereby libraries through that build a culture of and welcome people into a place where they feel safe, and people who are safe, who are seeking sanctuary, who may have come from areas of conflict, who have suffered from persecution. And actually, one of our library staff, one of our customer services managers, John Davis, and he's absolutely no relative as far as I know, he was awarded a BEM in the New Year's Honours List, and that's the services to the public through our public libraries. So I thought I'd take the opportunity just to list a few examples of some fantastic work by our staff, but that's not to say that there are many other teams who are also achieving some great things without awards being put on top of their particular team as such.
Supplementary.
Yeah, thank you for the very full answer. I did ask 2 years for a particular reason, which is that there are people going around, and I hear things as I'm going about my roles at council. There's a bit of an industry going about awards chasing within the council. Now, I'm all in favour of recognition for staff and what they do, but I've heard this said that we've got a bit of an awards chasing culture, you know, Muttley and the medals, if you remember that. So yeah, the 4 years thing was quite interesting because of course 127 applications over 4 years sounds better than 120 over 2, doesn't it? But I asked for 2 for a reason, because I wanted to get a picture of how much we're actually how much it's true or not true that we're chasing awards. So there. Yeah, 25% success rate in terms of applications. I'm just wondering how much, and are there dedicated staff actually working on putting in awards? Are there dedicated staff?
Yeah, no, I can cover. Yeah, we do have part of one post of a sort of fairly junior member of staff who actually helps process and facilitate this. But it is only part of their role. So from the perspective of investment in the council, it's fairly insignificant. But I wouldn't say there's an industry. I wouldn't regard one junior member of staff spending part of their time helping departments in terms of applying and understanding how to work through awards processes, particularly that. I think the other thing I would say is I would absolutely agree if we were just going for gongs for the sake of gongs, you know, and having nice little shiny medals.
Yeah.
I think what's important about this is the process the staff are going through in terms of understanding what we mean by excellence and giving them a chance to experience what will be seen as best practice. So I understand your concerns, and I would agree with them if that's what we do, and I don't believe we are doing that.
Okay.
Thank you. Question 6. Question by Councillor Lawson to the Cabinet Member for Regeneration, Councillor McBride.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. During the process of completing the local plan, what comments or advice were given by National Highways about the future management of the motorway junction and surrounding network at Chain Bar Junction, Cleckingham?
Thank you, John. You know the question's a bit naughty. These kind of questions should be posed to the Planning Committee, and when the local plan was passed, it did state very clearly the site you're referring to was an appropriate one for the kind of application that's currently being developed. And
supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I think you're probably trying to second guess what I'm going to say next. What I was going to say was the National Highways has shelved its plans to provide a dedicated access northbound to Bradford from the westbound M62. It was going to take the form of a flyover, if we remember. It had been there for many years as a plan form and has recently been dropped. The land previously set aside at the former North Byerley wastewater site is now being brought forward for development. So that option is gone for good. It is no longer an option, it is a dead option. What opportunities do you think there are to engage with National Highways to have a look again at the assessment of the local network?
it's not my job to speculate about a planning application planning application has a due process. I intend to abide by that and recognise the function that a planning committee fulfills. What the local plan did was to determine what was an appropriate site for different kinds of application, for housing or for large sites for development. That was made clear, and this site I think you're referring to was included as one such. Beyond that, the specific inquiry should relate to the planning committee, and really it's an abuse of the function of the planning committee to bring such matters to full council. These are matters that should be related to the appropriate committee, which is currently meeting, as I gather. Yep.
Not a planning question, but masterly use of an illustration of the difference between a response and an answer. Thank you.
All right.
Councillor McBride.
Thanks, Councillor Lawson. You've had a supplementary question. We've just got time to get the last question in. Number 7, question by Councillor Lawson to the Cabinet Member for Children, Councillor Kendrick. 4 minutes.
Thank you. Following the BBC News article on the 12th of November on hidden young carers missing out on support, how confident are you that we are reaching and assessing as many young carers as we can?
I'll thank you for the question, and not just do it out of politeness. I'll thank you for the question because this is a really, really important issue. I am assured that our young carer service does identify, assess and supports our young people with caring responsibilities in Kirklees. The provision has good links and works with practices across children's services. It does provide assessments, young carers groups, activities and family support where needed. And it has to be noted that some young carers and their families don't want to engage, I think sometimes because they make wrong assumptions, but there it is. This year, the service will further integrate with our new Families Together model to ensure that as many young carers as possible are identified and supported. However, there is always more that we can do. I am not at all confident that we identify every young carer who is looking after a parent who's ill or disabled, or looking after siblings because their parents are too ill and too disabled to do so fully. And it's something that we would want to strive to provide as much as we can.
Yeah, supplementary.
Thank you, Mayor. Briefly, Professor Sol Becker is quoted as saying that if all the children who needed support or were entitled to support came forward at once, not just in this borough, of course, nationally, then systems would not be able to cope. He estimates that there's around 75% of young carers who are not taking up the support that they're entitled to, so I'm missing out on things like valuable respite and what have you. So my question is, would you be willing to look at this specific item either at corporate parenting or as part of your portfolio? I'm very willing to help out with this and to work with you on this, but are you willing to take this up as a separate work stream? Thank you.
I'm certainly interested in doing so. I will also point out corporate parents who fill this room that where you are aware of someone in your community where a child or young person is a carer, that you have a conversation with that family about the support and help young carers can get. But yes, I'm absolutely keen. It's another thing on my list of things to do in children's services, and I do support the local government stance where it's very clearly said that if councils had enough funding resources to provide properly in identifying young carers, that councils would do even more than they're doing already. And I also chair the regional LGA Leave members meeting, and I will be raising it on that agenda, but I'm very happy to take it up as another work strand. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kendrick. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you. Moving on to item 12, page 79. The minutes of meetings of Cabinet. This is just here for information to note. So we can go on to item 13. We don't have time to finish item 13. Yes, Councillor Lukic.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that we suspend the Council Procedurals 5.2m and 13.2ii in order to skip the portfolio updates and provide opportunity for oral questions to the Cabinet members. Sadly, due to the disruption we've had.
Just repeat. Can you, for the legal officer, can you just repeat your CPR?
So the Council Procedural 5.2m is about the order of business and the Cabinet portfolio updates in there. And 13.2ii also refers to the Cabinet portfolio updates occurring before the questions to Cabinet members. So if we suspend those, then we can move straight to the oral questions. Because we've not had the chance to ask the Cabinet questions they've not had the opportunity to prepare for in advance.
So
legal officer.
Yes, so just to clarify, you want to change the order of business to bring the oral questions forwards, yeah?
I want to move to 13b.
Yeah, okay.
However.
And do you have somebody to second that?
That's seconded.
So you need to vote on that now.
All those in favour? Any against? That's carried.
Thanks, everyone.
So we go to oral questions. Councillor Bolt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Topical one, having what's just been said about questions. I mean, for a start, there is no opportunity for members to ask questions at planning meetings. So, but on that, with respect to the interference or involvement in planning, did Councillor McBride think that that extended to the Leader and Deputy Leader of Council, where he said in an email trail to people, or an FOI disclosed to people at Cleckheaton, that Leader and Deputy asked for communication, not the current Deputy, I hasten to add, the Deputy who was in fact Councillor McBride, that the Leader and Deputy asked for publicity for a sensitive planning issue to be withheld until after the elections. Is that interfering with the planning process?
Yeah, yes, sorry, carry on.
Mr. Mayor, I've answered this question numerous times, and Councillor Ball also asked me the same question in Cabinet, and I don't want to add anything further. I'm sure he's got a supplementary.
Supplementary.
Well, as the leader can't say whether that action is interfering in the planning process, what does he make of the reply to that was sent from Kirklees Council to the developers' agents on the 9th of May that says, "Thanks, redacted. I will let you know if there's any feedback. Worth noting that the Rockingham South Ward in Barnsley was won by a coin toss at last week's elections, having been a safe seat previously. The issue was a new Hermes facility, which divided local opinion. I'm pleased you choose to delay your public engagement in the circumstances."
Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Pandor.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Ball referred to a recent Cabinet meeting, £1.5 billion for a road scheme, which I said I will look into. And I find out that there is no such scheme that totals £1.5 billion.
No.
So from that, I can only conclude that he gets information from sources that I'm totally unaware of. The source that you refer to, I've got no idea where you get that from. But like I said, I've said in this council chamber on numerous occasions that I do not and will not whip any member of the planning committee or interfere in that process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bolt. Councillor Sheard.
do forgive me if I get names wrong, this is my debut. But I'd like to ask the Cabinet, I went round Oakwell Hall this morning speaking to the team that work there and run the park, and one thing that came up was about the environment and how the park is going to become environmentally friendly. So I'd like to ask the Cabinet how they plan to support Oakwell Hall and the team there, because they've stated that due to a lack of funding they're unable to put their environmental plan into action. So can the Cabinet commit to allocating sufficient funding to the park to put their plan into action, and will they give sufficient support to help the team?
Councillor Simpson. Councillor Simpson, do you want to do that?
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor Shear, for your question. Congratulations on it being your first. So it's the parks is my colleague, Councillor May, the cultural venues are mine, so it's slightly split between us, but I'll respond on this one. We are investing significantly in our cultural venues after a significant period of them being significantly challenged. I will take away what you've said in your question and look into it, because I want to make sure, of course, on the cultural side of my portfolio, that we're delivering the best possible thing that we can as a cultural venue, but also from my greener side, that we're providing those environmental improvements as well. So I'll absolutely take that away, and I'll be certain to get back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, right. No, obviously no supplementary. Councillor Marchington.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Comment on the question. The agenda for yesterday's Cabinet meeting was over 88 centimetres thick, 3¼ inches for people in Monmouth. That was made available to most of us 8 days ago, and it's exceptionally difficult to read and inwardly digest all the information we might want to do. I mean, of particular interest for those of us in the south of Kirklees about the Huddersfield Gateway and that. And again, it's in the light of other comments we've had about, particularly the move towards the committee system, about making information available to all of us as soon as possible. And I think if Councillor Walton, was here, she would ask the question, have you read your papers? Have you read your papers? And I'm absolutely assured that all the Cabinet members have read all, 100 and odd pages of that particular those minutes, every single one of them. But it was exceptionally difficult for the rest of us to do that. And we've had a number of call-ins in the past and requests about information being made to those, even to limited numbers of us, enable us to comment on and affect and shape the decision-making of this council. So there is a request. I mean, there was a brief, there was a short briefing for leading members a few weeks ago, but the request is, Shabir, Councillor Pandor, as leader of the council, can you please ensure that relevant members of this council, leading members and ideally all members of this council, get access to the same information that Cabinet members are privy to? Can members of this council be briefed in the same way that Cabinet members are, to enable us to either scrutinise or comment on key decisions for this council? And I think, again, reference back to Cabinet yesterday, a big chunk of that was about the Cooper Bridge call-in, widely recognised by numbers across party as being, thank you to Councillor Upal who chaired that, has been an excellent piece of scrutiny. But it would be much better if the scrutiny could have taken place before the decision had to be referred back to, that is referred back to Cabinet, proper use of it. And actually, it would have been a better use of everybody's time if we could have, that input from the relevant members could have been made beforehand. So can we have relevant information, well, at the same time as Cabinet members get it, ideally? Thank you. Oh, better stay.
Thank you, Councillor Marchington. Would anybody like to reply to that comment?
Mr Mayor, I'm here. Thank you, Andrew, for your question. And the only thing I'd like to focus on at the moment is we want to make sure that we get the best out of whatever we get from the review of the committee system. We had a really good conversation. Mark Edgell from the LGA came, and this council chamber had quite a lot of members that participated, and a lot of information did come back from there. And in terms of what we go forward with, we need to actually make sure that it's fit for purpose moving forward. Because I've been the leader since 2018, and I've inherited a system that was there for some time. Before me, or before my group came into power, we had a shared administration with yourselves, Andrew Marchington, Councillor Marchington, and before that there was a Conservative administration, and before that there was a Lib Dem administration, and it goes back. And the only thing I'd say is, you know, we are where we are, and we are the cabinet, you know, and we will be in a position where we will take the decisions, we will be held to account, and we will do whatever our role is within the constitution of this council. I can't promise you in terms of what you asked for, but one thing I can promise you is we will try and do our best to make sure every single member of this council is fully engaged. But we have an opportunity with the whatever comes out of the committee system process, because what it is what we don't want to do is go backwards in terms of what we're trying to achieve, because one of the things that I've discussed with a number of councillors across all parties is we want to get more younger councillors involved. We want to get more councillors who are also working, and as young councillors, they can't afford to just rely on a council allowance, and it is an allowance. So there's big questions here. At the same time, you know, we would like you to engage fully in how we actually shape a future that fit for purpose. Thank you.
Supplementary, perhaps?
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor McBride has assured us there's been no conspiracy over the transparent, and I believe Councillor McBride about that. And there seems to be a willingness to actually share information. What we're asking for, Shabir, is the sharing of information as soon as possible. Now, you said you can't promise that, and that is really not good enough. Julie, I can't remember that. Under one of the local government acts, I think it's 1993, 1995, all members of this council have a legal right to see information that's in the possession of the council, unless there's a good reason for us not to do that. And I think Councillor McBride has given a very narrow example of why we might not to do, where there might be a legal issue or where it might be to do with a public inquiry. So we need to see all the information that cabinet members are privy to enable us to either scrutinise the information properly or to shape the decisions that are made. Right? And it'd be really good, Shabir, if you could promise us tonight that you will do that. Thank you.
Sorry, I think there's two issues what you're talking about. One is sharing information, which I don't have a problem with. But then there's the other issue about Cabinet and its responsibility in terms of decision-making process. And I can only comment on the Constitution and what there is at the moment. In terms of scrutiny, we do have a very good scrutiny process in place. For a number of years, it's been well respected. And a number of councillors from across all parties have actually done sterling work on it, and I don't want to lose that. But what I want to do is build on that. And I think we've got a choice, haven't we? You know, do you want more pre-scrutiny, where we do share everything, and Peter clarified that in terms of moving forward, and I'm assuming that you do get all the information that the cabinet members get within the portfolio that you chair regarding your scrutiny role, and I'm sure you know you appreciate that we do share all the information, but then at the same time, you know, we have to get decisions made, and there's a trade-off. So I don't want to preempt anything in terms of what happens in the future regarding the committee system, but whatever we do, one of the main priorities for me is to make sure that we deliver for the residents of Kirklees. It doesn't matter who you are, where you live, what background you come from. We need to make sure that is my priority, and that is what I will always put forward. And ever since I became a councillor and then a cabinet member, deputy, and then leader, what I've always said is I will engage with everybody. I've always stood here in front of the council chamber that you are the champions and you are the democratic guardians of the Constitution. And if you feel that, you know, it's not working, come and talk to me. I will try and do everything I can. But there's a very clear role what the cabinet does, and with a very clear role of what scrutiny does, and planning and everything else. And I hope that as chair of scrutiny, you do get all the information that you request. If you don't, then you need to let me know.
Well, Council, it is now 9 o'clock. Well, it's gone 9 o'clock. So I'm sorry, Councillor Lukic, that we couldn't ask you. You couldn't ask your question. You did a good job there, but we couldn't get you. I was hoping we could get to you, but we couldn't get to you. So that's the end of the council meeting. Can I thank you for your patience, and please have a safe journey home. Thank you.